On a spring morning in 1946, a woman prepared for a confrontation with the Melbourne bookmakers. Joanna Pauline Tax, an Estonian immigrant, had bet on the same horse in its previous 15 races. It had won them all, and the mysterious woman in black was about to risk her everything on what she and half the nation believed would be Bernborough's 16th consecutive win.
She mainly wore a black dress, and I think she used to wear a purple hat most of the time. I remember her well. As a matter of fact, I followed her around the betting ring.
People were looking for something, and there's no doubt in the wide world they found it in Bernborough. Bernborough grabbed the nation. You've got no idea what it was like.
For a nation emerging from the shadows of the war, it was the long-striding Bernborough and his jockey Athol George Mully who carried us into racing's second and possibly final golden age.
And the pace is magnificent. Them was along in front, but after going...
Stood out there, splitting past. Must have got there an hour before the race and took out position and never left it. Bernborough was all the rage, and Mully pulled into the centre of the track and whoosh, down he went. These huge bounds and this beautiful horse stretching out. And I was just so in love with the horse, you know. That was the first of 15 for him, you know.
Tremendous crowd at Covington, and everyone seems to have the one idea, to back the hottest favourite on record in the Newmarket. 9-4 on. It's the mighty Bernborough.
Those 15 consecutive wins, all with Mully in the saddle, were good races.
With a furlong to go, Mully pulls him to the middle of the track.
And as the VRC Newmarket showed, it was as much how Bernborough won that fired the popular imagination.
What a stride, what a horse, what a finish. Mully shows him the whip, but it's not needed. Bernborough knows what he can do. Just watch him do it.
Time and again, seemingly beaten, he would surge to win, so that finishing like Bernborough became a classic Australian expression.
For one phenomenal season, you know, Bernborough carrying these huge weights and with this blinding finish he produced. He won in Queensland, he won in New South Wales, he won in Victoria. And he was just a phenomenon, you know, people believed in him.
Mully, who hated his own name Athol, was also celebrated for his tendency to forget the names of his mounts, double book himself, and even turn up at the wrong race meeting. But he was anything but distracted on Bernborough.
A man with a great feel for a horse, great feel for racing, was magic in the saddle. He was vague, but you put him on a horse and he was $1 million, he was an Einstein.
At the age of 75 and suffering from Parkinson's disease, he's still getting on a horse, and his memory of Bernborough is unclouded.
Bernborough was champion. Best horse I ever saw. He was something special. Well, his nature, his stride, his will to win. You know, become friends. Just one of those things, I think. Between man and beast.
The horse almost never made it to the national stage. Bernborough's original Queensland owner had been caught running a ring-in with a horse called Daylate. In fact, he'd killed the real Daylate. This led by a guilty association to Bernborough's ban from all city tracks. The horse's salvation came when he was sold to the Sydney nightclub and sly grog entrepreneur, Aslan Romano.
The Sydney racing scene was typified by Aslan the Dazzlin' Romano. The racetrack was the place where, and especially in Sydney, in the saddling paddock at Royal Randwick, you would see people who were referred to as the prominent Sydney businessmen and colourful racing identities mixing freely with the politicians and the captains of commerce and the sporting and entertainment personalities. And there in the middle of it all was Aslan the Dazzlin' Romano.
On Saturday, October 19, 1946, along with the Lady in Black, 108,000 came to Caulfield to see if Bernborough could make it 16 in a row. Even his lead-lined 10-stone, 10-pound handicap couldn't deter his supporters. Sharing the great weight of their expectations was Mully.
Pressure, terrible thing. Worries you, couldn't sleep, at night or anything. People ring up and say, "Good on you, George," and hope you win. Someone say, "Hope you get beat." Break your neck, fall and break your neck. Anything upsets you, you know.
There is some conflict as to the exact amount, but the Lady in Black may have bet as much as £10,000 on Bernborough winning the Caulfield Cup. What she didn't know was that some of her bookie friends were offering big money to stop the horse.
It was part of racing in those days, I think. And they tried to stand over me. I wouldn't be stood over.
They're off, and the favourite is slowly away. Mully, not anxious to force him with his huge weight, immediately switches him to the rails. In next to no time, he is second last.
From the start, it was clear that Mully and Bernborough were going to be given one hell of a rough ride.
There were a number of jockeys in that race out there for one purpose only, to try and beat Bernborough. Irrespective of what they thought of their own mount's chances, I think that was an absolute fact.
As they approach the turn for home, he is actually within striking distance.
For the Lady in Black and half the nation, it now all depended on that famous final burst.
I waited for a run between two at the top of the straight. They come together and stopped him dead in his tracks.
Bernborough finished fifth. In one of the era's most controversial decisions, trainer Harry Plant and Romano sacked Mully. Along with thousands of other punters, stunned to silence, the Lady in Black lost a lot. She said, "Now I have the big headache," and left the track.
I think she lost a lot. She never ever said.
Having left her footnote in racing history, Pauline Tax returned to the oblivion that is home for most punters. Plant and Romano, perhaps against the over-raced horse's best interests, pushed on. A fortnight after the Caulfield Cup, Bernborough lined up at Flemington in the McKinnon with new jockey Billy Briscoe. He was again favourite, up against Flight, the most beloved mare of the time.
Briscoe decides to move the big fellow up to Flight. And without apparent effort, he gradually overhauls the mare. What a galloper he is. Now, what's that? He's broken his leg. Briscoe's pulling him up. To the public, this is tragedy, if you like.
People broke down and cried because it did look for a long time as if he might be destroyed. And I was one of them. Bernborough was a great idol of mine.
A lesser horse would have got the bullet. Bernborough was put in plaster and later sold to the stud of Hollywood mogul Louis B. Mayer for nearly £30,000.
And one of the finest horses the turf has known is taken quietly away, never to race again.
While the 1950s had their outbreaks of youthful rebellion, Australia remained essentially middle-aged, conservative and nostalgic, much more pogo sticks than rock and roll. Our fear of the communist yellow peril involved us in a conflict that actually made us rich. War in the cold climate of Korea meant that wool growers were being paid as much as £1 per pound. As a result, even bush picnic racing was a boom industry. Though divided in other things, the bush and the city were one about racing. And essentially the track was the only place we could legally gamble.
I grew up, of course, alongside Randwick Racecourse and Doncaster Avenue. In the good old days when there was a surge of people walking up Doncaster Avenue to Randwick races. And it was like a lifeline. You'd see them walk up and the anticipation of victory, of success, the sparkle that was about them, and they'd walk up this street in droves.
Our Prime Minister would not have been among them. Robert Gordon Menzies detested racing, but worshipped all things British, especially his young monarch, who was a bit keen on horses.
The Queen is escorted to the Royal Box by the chairman of the Australian Jockey Club, Mr. Potter, and the main race is named in her honour, the Queen Elizabeth Stakes.
She formally allowed Randwick to call itself royal, and in her presence many of us seemed to become a race of capering forelock tuggers. However, there was at least one aspect of Australian racing that resisted the members' Anglophile tendencies. We had come to call a bloody race as we bloody well saw it.
Here's my hero, and a hydrogen finishing like a shot out of a gun. Waddella and Most Regal are going straight for straight. Waddella doing the better, and Waddella's going to win the cup.
The Australian race caller, there is nothing comparable anywhere in the world. That's, again, is Australianism expressed in its most manifest form.
They're racing in the Melbourne Cup.
Ken, London to a brick Howard, became the voice of Australian racing. He and his generation of race callers defined how a race should be called. His example of dedication to those who followed him was not always conventional.
One day he's calling this two-horse finish at Rose Hill, and I'm standing there beside him, and he's jumping up and down and he's pounding the bench, and the saliva is spraying all over the place. And suddenly I was conscious of something pink, wet and slippery, rocketing across the bench, sliding over my left hand, which was an eerie experience, and coming to rest against the glass of the broadcasting box. And it probably took a few seconds for me to realise that it was a big pair of dentures, Ken's dentures, but he wouldn't stop.
Twist of luck near the outside, it's Over's giving plenty of bother. Trying to get this one in is almost like trying to put toothpaste back into a tube, but it moves up better now as I speak. Might have heard me.
All right, let's go!
They're racing, and Lotus Bird near the outside was the best to begin from, moving up very quickly on the fence. Lungano.
Anyone who's heard his call of a Cranbourne trial or a race meeting at Deniliquin is unlikely to forget the voice of Jack Styring.
It's over, and last of all is Twist of Luck as they came along to put their bibs in the direction of the corner, and Lungano on the fence was breezing along on the steel, and he was out. It was something that appealed to me. I'd sit in the backyard pushing blocks around the yard and broadcasting races, and you'd have matchsticks going down the gutter when it was raining and calling them, etc. And Ruination, going like a scalded cat in the centre, is picking them up quickly as they settle down.
And when a horse has got its mouth open, he's got his molars bearing to the breeze like a codfish after it's young. And as they turn the corner, he'll say, as they peep their little hoots for home, brother, they're on their way. And he's staying like a bad mother-in-law.
I never used the one about the mother-in-law. I don't think I was ever game enough. I might have got my head kicked in for that one. And Lungano's been in front from the outset, and you can lay odds on, brother, he'll be in front on the line, and in the run to the judge.
And the language of the track became a central Australian metaphor. At election time, political commentators would find themselves wordless without the racing vernacular. And any contest too close to call demands a photo finish.
The photo finish camera, most hotly disputed innovation of the Australian turf. Scientists and optical experts say the camera is accurate. Thousands of punters maintain it favours the outside horse. The camera is lined
1948 was the first time the new technology was used in a Melbourne Cup. The result was not a happy snap. In the closing stages of the race, jockey Jack Thompson slashed Dark Marn through on the inside of the 80-1 rimfire. Riding the roughie was a 15-year-old apprentice, Ray Neville, who would never won a race on a city track.
Only the photo finish camera can separate Dark Marn and rimfire.
I know Dad felt that Dark Marn had won because the story goes that Billy Cook came up and said to Dad, who never showed any emotion but was smiling enormously, and said, "Who won?" And Dad said, stuck out his chest and said, "Oh, I did." And then the next thing, the photo finish came up, and he came second, and Rimfire was the horse that won. And I know he argued till the day he died that there was something wrong.
Some days after the Cup, the camera was found to be out of alignment, and it was obvious that the wrong decision had been given. But by then, of course, it was in the record books and the money had been paid. I know it weighed heavily on Jack because he never won a Melbourne Cup. I think he finished second 3 times. But right to the end of his great career, that was his deepest regret.
The day after his disputed victory, Ray Neville celebrated turning 16. He would win only one more race at Flemington. After a brief jumps career, weight problems drove him out of racing forever. In contrast to its troubled embrace of the photo finish, the VRC was later a pioneer in using race patrol film. In the eternal battle to keep those bastard jockeys honest, Big Brother cameras now began watching their every move, and perhaps with good reason.
When I was a kid, there was nothing to be for you to be going along, and the jockey next to you have hold of your saddle cloth. They used to get their foot in front of yours and just hold you there. But that was part and parcel of the competition, you know.
So all of a sudden, riding this one, there was odds on favourite. The owner fella come in and he says, "Can you I can't get any money out of this, he's going to pull it up." I said, "I can't pull it up." So he sat and hummed and that and looked at me, he says, "No way." I said, "No." "How'd 50 quid go?" I said, "I'll break a neck for that." And of course I got it beat. And everyone was happy. Until I got home and told my wife and give her the 50 quid and she went crookedly. "It's a stinking game, this, what you're in."
You've got the cameras and everything today. It's not like it was back then, when we had no cameras and 28 runners and you could nearly do what you liked, you know. Depended on how game you were.
Melville Lionel Shoemaker was as game as they come. In front of a Randwick crowd of 80,000, he was riding for his life on a horse called Blue Era in the 1961 AJC Derby.
Foul ride though it was, that's the greatest ride I've ever seen, Mel Shoemaker on Blue Era. Shoemaker was able to get this horse past the post first. He grabbed hold of the other jockey's leg, not only doing that at speed, 40, 50 mile an hour, but was able to literally pull him back. Then, while he was getting balanced, he'd give his horse a couple with a whip and grab hold of him again.
You couldn't say nothing. He went as wide as a sheep. He went wider than my shirt.
Tommy Hill said to me, that Shuey grabbed me by the leg. He said, "I'm going to protest, I'll get it." I said, "Oh, you're mad. Where did he pull your leg?" He said, "In the straight." I said, "Oh, Jesus."
Jack Burke said, "Well, what happened?" And Tommy Hill said, he grabbed my leg, Mr. Burke. Well, Mr. Burke was the chief steward and Jack Burke was staggered by this, as we all were. And he said, "Are you sure, Hill?" And Tommy Hill said, "Mr. Burke, I'd know if a snake bit me." So he said, "What have you got to say, Shoemaker?" And Mel said, "Well, that's preposterous."
Mel Shoemaker had become the first and perhaps the most infamous victim of the new patrol footage technology. The head-on shot cameraman had only just managed to get the camera working as they turned for home. The steward's room screening was something of a surprise.
I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe they had one. It was just one of those things. You see bike riders do it, you see runners do it, and it just, this time it just happened to be on film, and we got caught. What can't speak can't lie.
Shoemaker was disqualified for life.
There was a magnificent picture used in the Herald the next day of him walking out all by himself. I mean, a successful jockey had usually at that time had 2 or 3 helpers, but Mel Shoemaker, the little boy who'd been disqualified for life, was walked out with these 2 heavy bags on his own. It's a great picture.
Well, when you're down, no bastard wants to know you. It's when you're down, nobody wants to know you. When you're up, everybody wants to know you.
At the time, he couldn't know his sentence would be reduced, initially to 10 years and then to 5. The disqualification of Shoemaker was of course a warning to all jockeys. If they were going to indulge in dirty tricks, they now had to be much sneakier about it. Racing has always had the capacity to change the lives and the fortunes of its participants. But the story of Thomas John Smith is perhaps as close as it comes to the ultimate battler's legend. Born in 1920 near Braidwood, New South Wales, he was one of 7 children.
He found the bush, his memories of the bush were that of abject poverty, empty belly, hard work, long days, often long nights when he was rabbit trapping. It was really tough times.
He worked as a stable boy, first in Melbourne and then for trainer Max Sawyer in Sydney, where his dream was to be a jockey.
You look after a horse called Cargill. Anyway, the horse wins. And in those days, you used to give the apprentice or the strapper, whoever it was, that looked after a horse, a couple of quid. It was the done thing. Give him a couple of quid at the races on the Monday, at the track on a Monday or the Tuesday. Saturday night, Tommy Smith round my place at 8 o'clock. So I said, you come for your couple of quid? He said, I'm worth a $5. And I gave it to him because Tommy could tell you what every horse in the stable did. He knew more than the trainer.
Tommy was the greatest. Tommy, he was always a personality, but Dad said that nobody came from further behind the 8 ball. If you'd said to me in 1943, 44, what price Tommy Smith becoming a top trainer, I would have given you 100 to 1 with a concession. If you'd said he'd become a great trainer, he said I'd give you $1 million to 1 and you wouldn't have had to put your money in.
They gave him no credibility because he wasn't part of the club. He wasn't part of the accepted norm. Tommy was a rookie. He was loud. He was rash. He was brash. He was bright. He was all the things that racing, I think, the colour of racing needs and is. But to the establishment back in those, around the war years, before the war and around the war years, Dad was just horrendous. He was hideous.
Equally hideous was the horse that no one else wanted, and TJ took on. He named him Bragger.
Tommy brought him down here to Randwick, and he used to ride him himself. He was a good buck jump rider, Tommy. And he was a real mongrel of a horse, You just couldn't... Every morning you got on him, he bucked. Didn't matter.
TJ's obsessive persistence played its part in the destiny of another racing great.
Bragger was my first winner for TJ. At Rose Hill, my mother took the ride. I was living at Dover Heights, and I went to golf, and I said, if chap brings up Mr. Kerwin, take the ride. And anyway, when I come home, she said, Mr. Kerwin hasn't rang, but a nice man, very nice man rang. And I took the ride. I said, oh, don't tell me. Don't tell me it was T.J. Smith. She said, yes, Mr. Smith. Miss Bragger, and he won.
Bragger turned it all around for Smith. Over the years, he would be accused of being too hard on his horses, the bone and muscle regime. And after 1953, another racing rumour attached itself to TJ's success. In the Doncaster, Cotton Fingers George Moore rode the Smith-trained Tarian to victory. But in the aftermath of that win, Australian racing entered a less innocent age.
It was a lovely fine autumn day, and she bowled it in by 2.5 lengths, landed a fortune in bets, and then was positive, had a positive swab.
Tarian was one of 4 Easter Carnival winners disqualified after returning positive swabs to the stimulant Coramine. While substance abuse in racehorses was as old as betting, chemical encouragement, or its opposite, was now a matter of more public scrutiny, and therefore scandal. But old habits died hard.
If you got someone that, or something that you thought was going to make the horse go faster, well, you'd use it.
Caffeine, mostly. Sometimes I used strychnine and just, mix it up, but caffeine was the best. You used to put a cover it, get a threepenny bit, and put a bit of powder, caffeine on it, and get like a bit of a lolly paste or something, put around it, tie it on the bit, 2 hours before the race, and he'd lick it off. And 2 hours before he'd just start to move his feet, and he said, well, it's working right.
And many a bush trainer, men like Queenslander Jimmy Mann, swore by some very basic stimulants.
Jimmy spoke in this manner. We got a bottle of whiskey, gave it to the horse, but when we put the jockey on, he went at the knees. And we propped him up again and then got him to the starting gates, but when the horse had jumped, our horse was left at the barrier until the middle of the race, when he came with a terrific run, went right past the field until he got to the top of the straight, and he started pig rooting. And he was still pig rooting there when the rest of the field went past the post. So he said, we never ever tried whiskey again.
In 1947, the AJC established its first professional drug testing laboratory, headed by Gene Kimball. An appointment almost guaranteed to be unpopular with the male-dominated industry.
It was the first of its kind in the world because it was staffed purely by women. There were 3 chemists, Miss Kimball, Miss Miller and myself, and we had a washing-up woman, and we battled on there for a few years before all hell broke loose with the Tarian case.
Yeah, well, that was one of those things that the Dopian had come in, and most people were using some type of drug for horses, and Tarian returned a positive swab. And of course Tommy naturally got into trouble with the AJC over it.
Exposing drugs in a TJ horse was bad enough, but the girls in the lab had also nailed a horse part owned by E.A. Underwood, then vice-chairman of the Victoria Racing Club. The establishment wondered if it hadn't created some Amazonian monster.
The laboratory, our sort of, goodness was being challenged, our rightness, our ability to know what we were doing was challenged. They didn't think women could do it.
An English vet, Percy Sykes, was soon to join the Smith team. Sykes is generally credited with revolutionising the veterinary science of Australian racing. The man who once survived the bite of a rabid dog believes to this day that the ladies got it wrong.
There's no way in the world that Carbine could have been administered to Tarian. And you have to be at the track 2 hours before the race anyway. And this is one of these cardiac stimulants that bang, worked immediately, stopped immediately.
He's entitled to think what he thinks, and I'm entitled to know what I know, and that I know I didn't get it wrong. It was there for a long time before we finally got it. Simple as that.
Because the lab had besmirched one of their racing chaps, for the next 4 years, few Victorian horses raced in Sydney. From the beginning, the AJC tried its tricky little tests, once sending the lab a urine sample from a draft horse, which Kimball duly picked. But to the racing public, Jean Kimball was a hero, firing the first shots in a war still being waged.
She was a strong woman and stood up for her principles, and others disagreed with her. She was in a man's world. Racing was a man's world, and she got the heave-ho. See you later, Jean. Don't bother coming in.
In the prevailing social climate, her departure was perhaps more predictable than her appointment. In racing and everywhere else, women had their place.
And so Puffham takes the cup. And it's a double in good fortune for Puffham's owner, Mrs. J. Ferguson, who wins the cup and receives it from the hands of the handsome Lord Louis himself. Like a woman, she will have the last word.
But before the start, let's take time out to have a look at a very neat filly, well-groomed, but a little on the leggy side. Ha-ha, that's what I call a real racy type.
The AJC Easter meeting opens with Doncaster Day at Randwick, and fine feathers make beautiful birds.
Even Ladies' Day, Oaks Day. A magnificent sight with all them birds, the way they dress up. Oh, strike me. Fortune they spend on clothes. But it's good to look at. Many years ago, I went over to the Melbourne Cup. There was this girl with a mini skirt. Oh, it was mini. But I found out later it was Jean Chimpton, the famous model or whatever she was. But I tell you what, she was a good sort. And here I am caught peeping at her.
Racing everywhere. Racing throughout Australia. It was a man's domain. Just women just didn't have anything to do with it. You'd go along on race day, I believe, in your nice new hat and a nice new outfit and say, that's my husband's horse. That was it. That was women's place in racing.
Born and bred in Randwick, Betty Lane in 1962 applied to the AJC for a trainer's licence. She could see no logical reason for not.
Betty Lane took them on in the early days when really they had the yellow line at Randwick and the members, and they wouldn't let them over the yellow line to bet with the bookmakers because they were getting in the way of the serious punters. Not a bad idea really either.
But in her early 20s, Betty Lane entered the hallowed halls of the AJC, determined to cross that silly line.
Fools walk in where angels fear to tread, and that was me. I was the fool, and I went. This great room round a horseshoe table. These dear old gentlemen, all very elderly, or so they seemed to me then, looking over their horn-rimmed glasses at me and listening to every word I said. At the end they just said, "No, we're very sorry, Miss Lane. It is not our policy to license women." So that was it. No, very sorry. No, no, do this, do that. That was it. Just don't license women. So I was determined I was going to be a racehorse trainer. So I decided I'd go to the bush.
With a few £100 and an unraced horse, she headed west, where she was allowed to train. She set up shop near Dubbo.
I was living in a caravan. The place I bought had a garage on, which sort of served as a kitchen come bathroom come anything, but I lived in a caravan. And it was just so hot. I'd never experienced heat like it. Coming from Sydney, where you had the normal home comforts, to suddenly go out there and live under those conditions. Oh, hot, hot, hot. I didn't know what heat was till I got out there. But I learned.
In fact, she became a successful premiership-winning trainer in the Western Districts of New South Wales. It wasn't till 1982 that she finally returned to Randwick as the first woman to be granted a No. 1 trainer's licence. The era gave racing many things we now take for granted. Before the modern barriers were introduced in 1948, the start of a race was often a chaotic lottery.
Now for the Epsom. Shannon is very toy. Munro has a tough job getting him
It
to
was the
face
1946 Epsom that so cruelly exposed the limitations of the old walk-up start. 2 horses had been left behind, and one of them was the favourite, Shannon, and his rider, Darby Munro.
He got left 100 yards at least, and held the horse together and rode only as Darby can ride.
The hard-riding, hard-living Demon Darb was a jockey they both loved and hated, often in the same afternoon.
I can still see him riding that day. I was there, and I've got vivid memories of his ride on Shannon because, like most mug punters, I was on him.
In one of those remarkable rides, Shannon caught them by the home turn. Then, despite carrying 9 stone 8 pounds, horse and rider began to weave through the field towards the front runners. Impossibly, he closed on the 2 leaders, until at the finish there was only a head between the 3 of them.
Look at Shannon! Shannon! Demon Darb's riding, living up to his name. Shannon! He'll win. No, it's not to be. Blue Legend just holds him off, with young Bowman and Popham almost...
They booed and hooted, and there was a dreadful scene on the racecourse. And they booed the Derby. He had to get an escort off the course.
The starter took full responsibility for the Shannon Phar Lap, but the AJC didn't bother to announce this over the course PA. It was only later that the fickle racing public realised that Munro had ridden the ride of many lifetimes. But as Banjo Patterson had put it some 40 years before, Munro was merely suffering the most common of all racing syndromes.
In fact, the race was never run on sea or sky or land, but what you'd get it better done by riders in the stand. The rule holds good in everything in life's uncertain fight. You'll find the winner can't go wrong, the loser can't go right. You ride a slashing race and lose. By one and all you're banned. Ride like a bag of flour and win. They'll cheer you in the stand.
Few jockeys, before or since, were as victimised by the riders in the stand as Munro. The reality is, he could ride better drunk than many jockeys sober, and sometimes did.
Well, the trainer Snowy Baldwin legged Munro on, and Munro went right over the other side, landed on his back basically. And Raymond said to Baldwin, he always said, "We can't have this." He said, "This jockey's drunk. He can't ride." And Baldwin said, well, he said, "I know he's drunk, but he can ride." So he legged him on again, and Gay Invader won, and he won very well.
On the morning of the 46 Melbourne Cup, after a long night of it, Munro ran into a sober George Moore.
I was going to the track for about 5 o'clock, and Darby walked in, and he'd been disqualified some time before, and he was back riding, and he had a pig's head under his arm, and he had an apple in his mouth, and he said, "Meet my friend Mr. So-and-so," but I won't say who the name was.
He was so drunk at 6 o'clock on the morning of the race that he could barely stand up.
However, on that November Tuesday, he was sitting in the saddle of a 16-to-1 shot called Russia. He'd won the Cup on Peter Pan and then on Sirius, but his tactics on Russia seemed just a little hazy.
Derby's on Russia, whoever he did it. And I think he went to the front on Russia a long time earlier than he'd planned. Anyway, great rider as he was, it just bolted him. After he weighed in, he was extremely ill, brought his heart up for quite some time, for the rest of the day, I'd say.
The racing roller coaster ran over Munro again in 1948. In what to many was a strange and spiteful decision, the Caulfield stewards suspended him for 2 years, effectively ending his career. He died in April 1966.
When Darby Munro died, his 3 wives turned up to the funeral, to the Requiem Mass, and Darb had passed on, who had to pay the electricity bill for various convents that didn't have a bob to bless themselves with, orphanages and things like that. Now, that sort of generosity is rich and abundant in the history of racing, and people bailing each other out. I mean, there's also crooks and gangsters and spivs and all the rest of it, but there's a richness there too.
The years of wasting and heavy drinking took their toll on David Hugh Munro. He was diabetic and one leg had to be amputated.
They want to take his other leg off. They've taken one off and they want to take the other one off. He said, no, they won't take that one off. He said, I'll die with that one. And he did. He died within about 6 months later. And so it seems ironic then to, as I look back in hindsight, the events, that I should be nicknamed Darby McCarthy after Darby Munro, and then actually live with that same great man later in life when he goes to his dream time.
Darby McCarthy's riding career is forever set against the still unresolved reality that a smug, comfortable white Australia was a bastard about all things Aboriginal. As we scrubbed and polished the natives for a Royal Home movie opportunity, they and McCarthy in the 60s were still legally outcasts.
Here I am, Callummulla to Brisbane, a 3-year contract in Euro, and I can't even vote my own country. I feel sad. Sad for, not for me, for the system in my country.
His emergence from the Queensland bush and an environment offering neither hope nor opportunity is a testament to his ability.
A family of 13 kiddies. I was 4th youngest of the children. We lived down behind the cemetery and the sewage at our back door. I suppose we were sort of fringe dwellers. I was only a little fellow and I bought my first pair of longs, trousers, and I was a big shot. And I went to the race. I'm hanging over the fence and leaning, watching this bloke saddle a horse up. He said, "G'day." I said, "G'day." He said, "You want a job?" I said, "I've got a job." He said, "You want to be a jockey?" I said, "I'm already a jockey." He said, "What?" I was 12, actually. He said, "Where do you ride?" I said, "In Callummulla, Thargomindah."
McCarthy would race with success on some of the great tracks of the world, but he would never forget, as a boy of 13, that first win.
They had me in a big knee pad saddle, but I couldn't make the weight. I was too tiny. And a big cap on my head. And it was only a 800-metre race and 4 runners and gates open and bang, and away I went. They never saw me. I won the race. So I was King Billy. I thought, oh, wacko, this is a lie.
His ability would just break any barrier down. Once you had one look at him, there was no barriers. No barriers at all. You know, Cummings, anyone just used to put him on. Because that's how great a horseman he was.
But Comic Court's too good. Denon can put his whip away. He's coasting home, racing on to win by 3 lengths from Chiquita.
James Bartholomew Cummings had been a strapper for his father's Melbourne Cup winner, Comic Court. But his decision to become a trainer had been very much against medical advice.
So I had all these marks up my arm. I put protein of different grains and things, of oats, chaff, lucerne and things. So all those things I was allergic to. And the chap said, "Oh, you're easy to fix." He said, "Sonny," said, "you keep away from horses and you'll never look back." So not always you can take a good advice.
In the 1965 Melbourne Cup, Cummings had 2 runners, Light Fingers ridden by Roy Higgins, and Zaima with the West Australian Johnny Miller aboard.
And I followed Johnny Miller on Zaima into the straight. Went out after him. He put a couple of lengths on me shortly after we straight, and I thought then I'm in trouble.
Riding hands and heels, Miller and Zaima looked to have the cup won. In desperation and with a certain guilt, Higgins pulled the whip.
By hitting her, and as hard as I did, to me, I'm thinking to myself, you're selfish just to win a Melbourne Cup, but that's what a Melbourne Cup will do to you.
Light Fingers throwing out a desperate challenge. Zima about a neck in front. Light Fingers pegging him back. Light Fingers goes to Zima. They hit the line locked together. Dead heat. A dead heat in the Melbourne Cup.
Cummings has now trained 11 Melbourne Cup winners, and throughout that long, brilliant career, he has always kept it simple and to the point.
The cheapest thing in racing, I've often said, is patience, and it's the most seldom used. So I did it the cheap way and gave him plenty of time and patience, and that's paid off for me handsomely.
Higgins had a long and successful association with Cummings, and he won the Victorian Jockeys Premiership 11 times. But he forever cherishes Light Fingers.
If there was 110% in her body, she'd give it to you. And that was just her. They're dream horses. You know, they come along once in a lifetime. She might have been the best horse in the world, but to me she was.
The romance in racing that makes all things possible also completed the trifecta of the great Australian trainers. Like TJ Smith and Braga, the South Australian Colin Hayes began with hard times and just one horse, a jumper called Surefoot.
It was Dad's first horse, of course, and he was actually riding it and training it. And he'd pinched the honeymoon money, which wasn't that much, but he decided that he was going to make it a very good honeymoon or a low-budget camping trip. And Mum didn't know, of course, but he ducked off to the races with the cash. And he was 66 to 1 in an amateur race in 1850 at Cheltenham, and he backed the horse each way, and he missed the start, and he was hopelessly out of the race, and he was 66 to 1, so it was still a very good each way dividend. And he looked up, and he just rode it for his dear life for 1,200 metres, and for an amateur that's a very, very long push, especially when you've been wasting, and got up in the last stripe for third, which meant they could go on a honeymoon in semi-style and probably saved his neck from Mum.
Eventually, the Hayes ability with horses and humans, for he was always a gentleman, built Lindsay Park in the Barossa Valley. The stud and training showcase would bring some of the world's wealthiest to talk and deal horses with the Depression kid who'd bet on himself.
He had this great vision. Everyone said he was mad. He said no, he was going to go away from the cooped up stables of Adelaide. And he went up to Angaston and set up Lindsay Park, which is recognised as one of the great racing establishments in the world. Everyone said he was mad, but he was a man of vision.
Hayes, with Cummings and Smith, now became the $1 million trainers. And while Smith would become the most successful trainer in the world, he would forever be associated with one horse, the swayback hero, Tulloch.
A colt that's established an Australasian racing record. Tulloch, the wonder colt that mows them down.
He was nasty. You know, he's not a horse you can take a risk while you go in the box, just walk in the box. He's likely to stick a boot into you or bite you, or that sort of thing. But on his back, he was a gentleman. But Tulloch was Tulloch.
Now watch the glamour colt go. He's just leaving them for dead. Going further ahead at every stride. 4 lengths, 5, 6, 7, 8. What a champion. Prince Darius is second.
His 3-year-old career was just extraordinary, and I would say Tulloch as a 3-year-old was a better horse than Phar Lap and a better horse than Carbine. He won 11 Group 1 races as a 3-year-old alone.
But in 1958, young racing journalist Keith Robbins broke the shattering news that Tulloch had a life-threatening mystery illness. Tommy Smith vehemently denied it to the other papers.
I get in at 2 o'clock, summoned in McNichol's office. He said, get a photographer and go out to the Smith stable and get a photograph of the horse you've killed and come back here and we'll consider your future. I said, oh, well. He said, and get a tram. And out we go. Bang, bang, bang. Come here, Tommy, bang, bang, hitting on the wire thing, you know. Anyway, eventually came out. And you should have seen him. He had, you know, he had a big beard and he looked 100. His eyes were bloodshot, you know. He was frothing at the mouth. He had straw all over him. His hands were dirty. His clothes were putrid, you know. He said, you bludger. He said, you got the hide to come here. I haven't even told my bloody owner the horse is nearly dead and you've got it in the paper to tell keep shooting, you know. So he said, no, you know. He said, I don't know whether it'll survive or not, you know. You've got me in the biggest blue of my life, you know. By this time I'm full-chested, you know. My story's right. I haven't been sold a dummy, you know. Come on, Ali. So we'll get a cab back. We're not going to get the tram with this story, you know. So we got the cab back in and I strained in McNichol's office and I said, I want page 1, you know.
He was just bone, that's all he was, you know. He was lying there he was standing there like a skeleton, you know. But Perce used to come and treat him 2 and 3 times a day. Although I have no doubt the horse would have died had Perce Sykes not been around.
Look, I almost hate to say this. I mean, whether it fluked it or didn't fluke it, I don't know. But I used a very, very old medication called Brilliant Green. Never dared tell anybody about that because it sounds too stupid to be true. Now, whether that did it or not, within 48 hours, he didn't scar and he didn't scar again.
Against all expectations, Tulloch survived. But it was 2 years before he attempted his comeback. As Tulloch prepared to race at Flemington in the Queen's Plate over 10 furlongs, many thought Smith was asking too much of the horse.
Tommy was probably as tense as I was because he knew he was up against the best horses in the country, Lord, Darlagiri, you name it.
On the stalls, Trellios near the rails, bounced out in front of Lord. Tulloch is on the outside of that pair of half-length back.
Ridden by Neville Selwood, the open-mouthed Tulloch stuck with Melbourne's weight-for-age champion, Lord. There was nothing in it as they turned into the long Flemington home straight.
They sort of locked together as they come round the turn. The 2-horse race it was, and it was 2-horse wool right to the wire.
Tulloch, straight by straight, is racing up on the outside of Lord.
They just slugged it out for about 1.5 furlongs down the straight, head for head. Great finish. One of the best races I've ever seen.
Gunsynd in front, Lord is coming again. Lord and Tulloch are going to the line, absolutely locked together, and they hit the line. Photo, and I'll give it to Tulloch.
There were tears in everyone's eyes, including mine, you know, that he'd come back and won, you know.
I've never seen anything like it. And I must admit, that's one of the few times in my life where I think a bit of the Italian came out and the tears are running down my cheek and I felt stupid. I had to go down the bottom of the stand and the noise from the bottom of the stand was incredible. There must have been 90-odd thousand people there stamping their feet. I don't know how many people lost their hats because it was a sea of hats. It was an incredible, incredible sensation.
Time has lent a sentimental enchantment to the view of the era's racing. It's also simplistic to see the 60s as an end of the glory years. There were great days still to come, but there was trouble too. When George Mully and Eskimo Prince won the '64 Golden Slipper, the slightly exaggerated story is that owner Perce Galea threw handfuls of cash into the Rosehill crowd. Galea was known as a friendly, generous man, especially to the Catholic Church, but he was also a major illegal casino operator. In retrospect, he would seem to be ushering in a time of villainy. Organised crime, drug money, horse doping, George Freeman and Robert Trimboli. were coming to a track or bookmaker near you. Sometime before midnight on April the 2nd, 1984, a car was torched near Bulli, just south of Sydney. Inside the burning vehicle was the savagely broken body of horse trainer George Brown.
George Brown was a horseman. He was never going to make the annals of the all-time great, but he knew what he was doing, and he was a kind man, a pleasant man. Nobody deserved to die the way that George Brown died.
The Saturday before he died, Brown was in Brisbane. He was meant to run a ring-in at Doomben.
The substitution didn't occur that was supposed to have occurred. That is, they were supposed to substitute a good horse for a bad horse, and the trainer got cold feet and didn't do the substitution. And as a result of that, the trainer, George Brown, was brutally murdered.
Yet it would take more than one man's tragedy to save racing from its potentially terminal rot. It would take a farce. In the 1964 Golden Slipper at Sydney's Rose Hill, the much-maligned Athol George Mully rode Eskimo Prince to victory. The horse was owned by Perce Galea, a former milkman. His involvement in illegal casinos had made him very rich. It's part of racing folklore that Galea threw £10 notes into the crowd.
Perce Galea, the Prince of Punters, was of course to Sydney in the 1940s, 50s, 60s and 70s what John Wren had been to Melbourne in the 1890s and early 1900s.
He was just one of the many colourful racing identities who would make the story of the next quarter of a century so vivid. And like so many of them, Galea had friends in high places.
One of the most famous photos in Australian racing is the photo of Sir Robert Menzies, the Prime Minister of the country, the head of the Catholic Church in Sydney, and Perce Galea, the king of the illegal casinos in Sydney, in their tuxedos at a formal dinner in Sydney.
Galea, who claimed he was a papal knight, was much closer to the Premier of New South Wales, a man who made a bob or two from selling off secular knighthoods. Robin Askin came to power in the last of the Menzies years. As much as his Prime Minister despised racing, Askin loved it.
He was on course, normally sucking a cigar, enjoying himself. He loved to have a bet. They all get to the races, princes and paupers. Bob Askin, Murray Farquhar, who later hit a brick wall, High Court judges, you know, we get them all at the races. But you know, great equaliser. Everybody's there to try and back a winner.
Askin's election, not entirely coincidentally, began an era on the track when greed would grow to an epidemic. Racing was far from the sole victim, but it was perhaps the most vulnerable. Askin didn't invent corruption, he just made it more efficient, and he knew where the money was buried.
Askin, as the Premier of New South Wales, really looked after the SPs. Instead of all the SPs having to pay the local cop, they now had to only pay one man. And the bag man used to go into city tats, and I've seen this, and the bag person used to collect the tribute from the SPs once a month.
Hello, just a second, Peter. Mr. Rod's on now, 10 and 9 on Valley, 130.
The nationwide network of illegal starting price bookmakers was simply one of the great Australian institutions. Half the population bet with them.
200 on Palooka, thanks.
And Askin had himself been an SP.
He understood the fact that in every suburban shopping centre there was SP betting activity going on every Saturday afternoon, and he understood that this was a very good source of campaign funds for anybody who allowed them to operate, and more importantly, there was a bit of a no-win situation in trying to crack down on it. He encouraged the connection between the SP bookies and the government.
Mutually and openly, Askin always acknowledged the role of William Stanley Waterhouse in making him Premier. Bookies gave generously to his election costs and encouraged their clients to vote for him.
As a punter, he bet when he was at the race, on every race, not in big, but he's the one fella that always paid. Never, ever, and they all say he never paid, he never, ever didn't pay. He was the most honourable of the lot.
But in the 60s, it was the giant punters who helped make the dynastic Waterhouse famous. Gambling men who were the stuff of nightmares for the average bookie left him the biggest satchel swinger in the world.
I've worked in England at the English Derby and the Queensland course, Royal Ascot. I've been to Vegas, talked to the gamblers there where there are legalised bookmakers in the state of Nevada. You couldn't compare the betting that goes on elsewhere in the world with what goes on in the rails at Randwick.
He stood tall. There was always a buzz about him. I've never seen a man that could write tickets as quickly as Waterhouse. And he was a machine, and you could see that he had the eye of the tiger too. He'd be up there, and you could have a day at the races just watching Bill Waterhouse.
Really, over the years, I've taken on big punters in the initial part, more or less to get rid of them, to, for want of a better word, to kill them, to break them, so that you can carry on your normal business. It's like the old adage of the Wild West, the fastest gun has got to prove himself all the time.
Betting with Waterhouse was a kind of blood sport, its players stars in their own right. Hollywood George Edser, Frank Duval, the Hong Kong Tiger, the fireman Eddie Birchley. Their betting duels were public and often personal.
It's a duel to the death, if you like. One of you will break the other. You'll break him as a gambler, or he'll break you as a gambler. You're just concentrating on one man, and you put yourself in his mind. You can do that.
And he did, to Philippe Ishmael, the Babe, the Filipino industrialist mate of Ferdinand Marcos.
He's the first guy who ever put $1 million in a horse with me.
On Melbourne Cup Day 1967, Big Bill had decided that red-handed would beat the 4-1 joint favourite, General Command. And he was sure that Ishmael would come for him in the Flemington ring.
I know he's going to back red-handed in the Cup. And it was Four's General Command and red-handed, the two favourites. I saw him coming through the crowd out of the corner of my eye, and with that I turned around and I looked at him. I looked him straight in the face. He stopped in his tracks. It was a crowded day. I turned to the ball 9-2 red-handed.
Blatantly, he was offering the babe better odds on red-handed, taunting him to wonder why.
Calculated. And I knew he'd be suspicious. He came straight to me and he said, 200,000 and 50,000 general command.
It's Redcrest just got his head in front of the furlong from red-handed, fighting back.
Roy Higgins duly rode the Bart Cummings trained red-handed to victory. General Command came in 6th.
Pegging them back, but red-handed's too good. He's won the cup and neck to Redcrest.
That was that had a tremendous effect on Ishmael. That was the beginning of the end of him with his punting with me. Like, he went downhill after that. It really wrecked his sneaking.
Light Fingers throwing out a desperate challenge.
Red-handed gave Cummings his 3rd successive Melbourne Cup. Roy Higgins had won on Light Fingers in 65.
Galilee strides to the front 100 yards from home and comes right.
Then Johnny Miller in 66 on Galilee, which had also won the Caulfield and Sydney Cups for Cummings. But such was the nature of the times that even the man who would be king of the Cups became a victim of the corrosion that followed the money into racing. The 1969 favourite for the Melbourne Cup was the Cummings-trained Big Faloo. As the winner of the Caulfield Cup, it was massively backed to take out the double. The night before the race, the horse was given a brutal dose of laxative.
I knew there was something wrong with the horse about an hour or so before the race, so I went up to the main stand and found the Mr. Burke, the chief veterinary surgeon for the VRC. He walked down and had a look at the horse, and it was just at that time it was scouring badly, so obviously someone gave it something to upset its stomach.
The siren went. Big Faloo has been scratched from the Melbourne Cup. Well, here's this horse been back for a squillion in doubles, You could have heard a pin drop at first, and every pressman ran.
Higgins, who would have ridden Big Faloo, was forced to sit it out with Cummings.
He was ashen grey through the shock of it all. Absolute shock. He came in the jocks room to get away from people, to come in to sit down, I think. And they were getting to him, they really were.
The Cup was won for the 2nd year running by the 8-1 chance Rain Lover, ridden by Jimmy Johnson. The surviving favourite, Tails, ran 7th.
Now, the horse could have collapsed. If it was another 20 minutes down the line, that horse could have collapsed and brought half the field down. Killed me, killed others, killed horses. You've got these evil human beings out there that would do that to a dumb animal just for the thought of an illegal dollar. An illegal dollar. And I ran into the guy a few times and I spoke openly about him. I'd spit on him.
A Cummings strapper, Leslie Edward Lewis, was subsequently charged and then acquitted of the Big Faloo doping. But 30 years later, believing he was dying of cancer, Lewis admitted to doping Big Faloo.
Money was speaking all languages, which it always has. And you get $1,000 wage in front of you when you're only working for $1 an hour, which a lot of people haven't worked out. It's a lot of money to have put in your hand. A lot. And you're willing to take that risk for it.
During the original police investigation, it was discovered that Lewis had made a number of interstate calls to business numbers associated with Bill Waterhouse. There was no evidence the strapper ever spoke to the bookie.
When the police investigated, they cleared me. No, I wasn't involved. I hadn't laid the damn thing. But that didn't stop the witch hunt, and my name was just bandied around as I was hot lurking in the background. But I'd been cleared by the police, and that is official.
Not since the attempts to shoot Phar Lap and Beau Vite had there been such a big race go at a horse. Drugging horses to win or lose is as old as racing. By the 60s, the testing technology had made doping more likely to be exposed. But as always, there were suspicions that the bad guys were a chemical step or two ahead of the whitecoats. And at least some of the scepticism was justified.
He was a real nervous horse, very flighty horse. And so we got him onto heroin to calm him down. We used to get up 3 or 4 in the morning, go down and give him a shot of heroin because, like any addict, he needed his hits. And he needed them daily.
But the growing demand for smack was human. By 1967, Sydney had become a rest and recreation bordello for thousands of well-paid US servicemen in their brief escape from the crazy Asian War. They brought their money, love, and a few other habits to town. It would be simplistic to blame R&R for hooking Australia into heroin, but the trade began to boom. The illegal off-course betting industry became both merchant banker and laundry to the big traffickers.
The monies were coming from SP and illegal gaming, and they were flowing through to organised crime. And when we speak of organised crime, there was a definite connection between here and the mafia in America.
One of the links was George David Freeman, friend and business associate of a major mob banker. The dapper little man had risen, seemingly without trace, to the good life in a waterfront house he'd actually bought from Per Scalia's son. Yet he'd been a shoplifter and an incompetent petty crim. Traditionally, the SP industry had been like a loved but shady uncle, the black sheep we fondly forgave. But drug money and the likes of Freeman made it something much less benign.
I wasn't an SP, I was a punter.
But you admit to being an SP.
I admit being an SP. I'm not a SP bookmaker today.
No, but you admit to having been one in the past.
Of course I do.
Right,
I was
well,
just
how
fine
big
for
was it?
It was just ordinary.
What do you mean ordinary?
Very small.
What do you mean very small?
Well, what do you mean very big?
He was dealing with jockeys, dealing with trainers and trying to rig, this jockey isn't to try, that jockey's to get the dream run and all the rest of it. There was no secret at the time. Everybody knew what was going on.
Oh, what's doing, mate? How are you? No, I haven't got that race yet.
George, of course, became so expert, in inverted commas, at tipping that everybody was keen to get his tips. And you might remember that he was tipping to Murray Farquhar, and to certain other eminent citizens of New South Wales availed themselves of George's information.
A famous photograph of Freeman at the races with Dr. Nick Paltos, later sentenced to 20 years for importing hash, and Chief Magistrate Murray Farquhar, jailed for perverting the course of justice, underlines his influence.
George Freeman's never done me any harm, and it was proved at this commission that he had not done anyone any harm.
Did you always believe that he was a man of good standing?
Not of good standing, but I believed he was a man of sincerity.
He was a hoodlum, and for all his so-called toughness, he was a person that scared easily. I recall being told that when I was recalled to SP bookmaking, that he really panicked, and the first thing he said, the bastard will come looking for me straight away. And to that end, he might have been right.
For all the race-fixing accusations against Freeman, it's not an easy business. It's fraught with uncertainty. Jockeys can be unpredictable and tricky, however much dirty money they're offered.
Lots and lots. But I would never want to do that. I was never interested in that. I always wanted to win. There were certain times that the horses were not fit enough, and knowing, they were in the favourite, one of the favourites, and I'd know prior to that they just weren't fit enough to win. And be offered money and say, I said, yeah. I knew the horse couldn't win.
If you can gamble on it, someone's going to fix it. It's that simple. Once a month or so, I suppose, a couple of jockeys would get together and set something up, or a trainer would get together with a couple of jockeys, or something like that would happen.
500 to play 6.
The reasons that graft and greed, growth industries in the wider world, targeted racing are both obvious and subtle. The fact that fortunes can be made in minutes is the simple temptation of the track. Yet for all its villainy and hard men, racing demands a certain innocence and romance, which is where the bastards hide. And however dirty it may get, there are always the redemptions, the heroic, occasionally human, mostly equine.
It's Longfellow and Gunsynd on the turn together from Montefique and
Gunsynd, the Gundawindi Grey, had been bought for just $1,300, but he would end his career as the biggest stakes winner on the Australian track.
But the great grey Gunsynd in front, he's too good. What a champion, the crowd roars and Gunsynd wins a length to Wallshot.
Kids used to write in and that, they'd want pieces of hair from his tail and his mane and all this sort of thing, you know. And being a good horse like he was and won these good races, and people loved to watch him.
In the home straight now, Grand Sidium on the inside, Like a Lover in the centre, and Imogil join issue over the final 200 metres. Like a Lover seems to be getting the upper hand, but in the last stride, Imogil snatches victory from Like a Lover with Grand Sidium third. An exhilarated Tommy Smith, as Imogil's success gives him a training record of 7 AJC and 18 overall Derby triumphs.
Like Tulloch, Gunsynd was trained by Thomas John Smith. It's unlikely that anyone will ever again dominate a state's city racing as he did Sydney's. When he won the training premiership in the 84-85 season, it would be for the 33rd consecutive time.
This man was the most revolutionary person to ever hit racing in Australia. There will never be another person like TJ Smith, and there has never been anyone like him. Not because I'm his daughter, but believe me, you pick up the record books and they tell you the story of TJ Smith.
Where you go, Peter? Where you go? I'll trot him around the middle. Please trot around the middle and careless.
On June 17, 1974, Smith passed the $1 million mark in stakes money for the year. But by then, he was only the second trainer to do it.
I beat him by about 3 hours. He never forgave it. Yeah, I remember that.
A length and a half, Lawman. Kingston Town can't win.
But it was Smith who sent out the first horse to win $1 million. Kingston Town, perhaps the greatest antidote to the toxin of the times.
Kingston Town flashing, he might win yet the champ. Grosvenor took the lead off. Kingston Town swamping them. What a run. Kingston Town wins it next to Grosvenor.
He could do things that other horses couldn't do. He won the Derby and the Sydney Cup in the space of 7 days. He ran second in the Melbourne Cup, well, we all know that he probably should have won the Melbourne Cup.
Mick Dittman on Goner's Lane fought his way through the inside runners. It will forever be remembered as one of the greatest cup rides. And it left Kingston Town amazingly without a Melbourne Cup.
Goner's Lane after Kingston Town. Goner's Lane goes home too well and beats Kingston Town. Noble Comet ran third.
He was ridden that day by a jockey who was both hero and villain.
Everything went according to game plan, except getting beat a neck. In our game, you win by a neck, you're a superstar. You get beat a neck, you're a mug.
Soon afterwards, Malcolm Johnston, a man suspended more often than anyone, was replaced as Smith's stable jockey by Dittman.
It was a shit of a year, 1982, but everyone sort of says, is that your greatest disappointment in racing? And they half-pie expect me to say yes. For mine, the 82 Melbourne Cup was a horse race. I lost a couple of very good friends due to race falls. David Green, Kenny Russell, who I was very, very close to, and Nolly Barker. When they lost their life in a race fall, for mine, that was a disappointment. Not getting beat in any Melbourne Cup.
But such a sense of perspective seems strangely innocent in an era of men who were literally capable of murder.
There was a massive trade in drugs and everything, and some of these drug barons, in order to launder the money, were going to the races, and there was none stronger than Trimboli. I remember when Trimboli first got to the races and started betting big, I said to somebody, do you know him? And they said, yes. I said, what's he do? He said, he grows rice in the Riverina. And I remember saying to him, Yes, but my information is that that's half correct, but I think you've got the wrong crop.
I don't remember him as being a huge punter, but I suppose bets of 5 and 10,000 were quite commonplace with him. And he was a very an honourable man with his dealings, and we didn't know what his background was, but there was most certainly he behaved himself impeccably.
Aussie Bob Trimboli was just one of the stars of what became known as the Age Tapes. The police phone taps revealed, among much other dodgy business, that drug lord Trimboli attempted to launder his filthy fortune by betting on races he'd fixed.
The TABs became euphemistically known as the criminals' laundromats. There was a great incentive for organised crime to say, OK, well, what we'll now do is make our money out of the drug trade, but we'll attempt to convert it into the famous cliched race winnings by backing half a dozen horses in a race, all the main chances, at the TAB.
Which is precisely what Trimboli did. He was also happy to buy every jockey in a race and offered trainers drugs, not for them, for their horses. The fact that almost no action was taken against the jockeys and trainers dealing with Trimboli suggests that racing authorities, somewhere in the 70s, had lost the will to clean out the stables. In Sydney, someone had tried to kill George Freeman. He'd survived a shot in the face, and he would remain bulletproof against a barrage of allegations that, like Trimboli, he was a race fixer.
What a win! The 2000 Amy Golden Slipper. The CEO of Amy.
Freeman's social circle then included this man, Graham Pash, current chairman of the Sydney Turf Club.
Whether it was Steven Spielberg or Dick Francis.
When Freeman remarried in the early 80s, Pash and a number of prominent racing men were at the wedding.
Graham Pash, who's now the chairman of the Sydney Turf Club, he was the best man at the wedding. Don Story, who's a director of the Sydney Turf Club, he was at the wedding. Certain prominent journalists were at the wedding, racing journalists that is, and certain prominent bookmakers who are still operating were also at that wedding. And the overall picture just didn't smell very good for racing.
Freeman boasted that the wedding had been paid for by his winnings on a horse called Mr. Digby. An ice statue of the racehorse was the up yours centrepiece at the 1988 launch of Freeman's autobiography.
George loved the horse. You've got to appreciate this, that some people get an unhealthy attachment to horses. Some of them are bloody slow horses.
On August 5, 1981, Mr. Digby, having run nowhere 2 days earlier, was heavily backed and won by nearly 8 lengths. Despite the fact that several of the beaten jockeys seemed to be working hard to stay that way, there was initially no steward's inquiry, though eventually both trainer and jockey were disqualified over the form reversal. It was then revealed that Freeman's wedding guest, STC director Don Story, also won on Mr. Digby. A campaign was mounted to have Story thrown off the board. The STC found no evidence his win had anything to do with Freeman. Story survived, and Freeman's best man, Graham Pash, would later label his wedding roll one of life's great misjudgments. Shortly after, Sydney had a new chief steward, the sheriff, John Schreck.
My grandfather was a keen race fan and a real personality, and I remember him talking about how tough racing was, and he said when I was a bit of a kid that, look, the first thing you should do about racing is when you go in, take your scruples off and put them on the gatepost, and when you come out that night, pick them up and away you go with them again.
The Schreck realism, his initial get tough with jockeys, could not, however, save George Brown from that burning car.
He was just an ordinary trainer. He was one of probably 30 or 40 battlers here at Randwick, you know. But when they just locked him like that and burnt his body, it was a beastly, ghastly thing, you know. Ooh.
Brown's murder may explain why some of the conspirators in the next major racing disaster, the Fine Cotton Affair, persisted with the scam, even when it started to go so wrong. It was certainly trainer Hayden Haitana's justification.
Oh, they just told me I'd end up like George Brown, you know. There's always those threats involved. There's guys walking around the stables carrying guns and stuff, pistols.
At Brisbane's Eagle Farm on Saturday, August the 18th, 1984, a horse listed as Fine Cotton narrowly won a minor race. Racing is full of surprises, and Fine Cotton had been backed from 33 to 1, odds that on its form were even then a tad tight, into a hot 7 to 2. It's a much-told story, though some large and critical gaps remain.
I can see the look on the face of one of the jockeys who was sitting in the jockey's room, smiling broadly, and I said, "What on earth is going on?" I said, "Jimmy, there's a ring in." I said, "Oh, cut it out, please. A ring in here at Eagle Farm."
In fact, a superior galloper called Bold Personality had been substituted. The horse originally bought for the ring-in had injured itself weeks before. So apart from carrying different brands, Bold Personality bore very little resemblance to Fine Cotton. It wasn't even the same colour.
They thought that if they got hair colouring and got enough to fill up a couple of buckets, you could cover the horse with it to make it look like Fine Cotton. But as it turned out, it doesn't take to horses' hair. There must be a chemical disbalance there somewhere. So they just went ahead and tried to paint its white feet brown, but the horse came out red like a Hereford bull, so I couldn't believe it.
The ring-in was clearly the worst-kept secret since Sir John Kerr's drinking habits. Money came for the horse from Sydney and Victoria, Darwin, Fiji and Papua New Guinea. As the horses returned to scale, there were already voices shouting, "Ring in," and "Wrong horse."
I thought, well, I'm in big trouble here, because by that time pandemonium broke out. People are jumping the fence and yelling "Ring in" and all that, so I thought, I'm gone. You know, I didn't even get to pat the horse when it come in.
I got about 8 or 10 scoops out of Fine Cotton. I love that, you know. I was on holidays on August the 18th, 1984, and I just walked to the first tee at the Lakes. I'd played the back nine first, and a couple of fellows rushed home and said, Keith, there's been a ring in it at Eagle Farm. I said, "You're joking?" I said, "No, a horse, Fine Cotton." He said, "Fair dinkum." Yeah.
Fine Cotton, I think it was the greatest joke of all time. Everybody knew. Like, you know, for a rort, for a duke, for a scam, it was a joke. Now, I was at Warwick Farm at the time, and the buzz was around that, you know, that there was something on in Brisbane, a horse looked for Fine Cotton, one was the horse to beat. I'd say a minute after the race, somebody said to me that Fine Cotton is Bold Personality and the Waterhouses are involved.
Well, I'd like to think I'd do a better job. Insofar as it was a terribly amateurish thing. I don't think anyone that understands how amateurish it was and how stupid it was would ever think that any racing person would be involved with it. It's just so stupid. To think that you could ring a horse in on a metropolitan racecourse is absurd.
At first, Robbie denied backing Fine Cotton. But a number of people with strong Waterhouse associations were found to have backed the horse in ways and in places that might avoid attention. Among them, a Catholic priest, Father Edward O'Dwyer. He happened to find himself at the Appin Dogs, betting on Fine Cotton. The circumstantial net of having been in the know closed on the Waterhouses.
The evidence in relation to prior knowledge was overwhelmingly against them. Overwhelmingly. The AJC committee found that, gave written reasons for it. Judge Goran found that, gave written reasons for it, and the evidence stacks up. 100%, no question. End of story. Next question.
If I'd have had prior knowledge
I can assure you it wouldn't have happened. When you're going to do something which is dishonest, it's got to make sense. To back a horse from 33 to 1 to 7 to 4, it just doesn't make sense.
I'm not sure what the word prior knowledge actually are meant to mean, but there's no doubt that I was wrong, firstly, to be involved with backing a horse somewhat surreptitiously, and number two, more importantly, not telling the stewards everything I knew about it.
Robbie only put his money down when he knew he had an edge. And it is not an edge to know that there might be a ring-in going on. There's only an edge if you know the substitution has occurred.
Part of the truth had gone fishing in darkest Tasmania. Big betting merchant banker and Waterhouse associate Ian Murray had originally claimed his fine cotton bet of over $50,000 had nothing to do with Robbie. Shrek rode out in search of Murray.
We proceeded to madly dive around all the tracks we could find around the central parts lakes of Tasmania. And as it would happen, we eventually went across over this ridge, and there before us, like the charge of the cavalry coming, was Mr. Murray and his people.
To trek through, all that bush at Tassie and come and find the tent in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of Tasmania. Just imagine he's pulling back the flap and there's Ian Murray down there sitting there probably sipping a scotch, and the sheriff's walked in. You can imagine the reaction, couldn't you, You would poop yourself, wouldn't you?
It was freezing cold, a big raging fire going, and he and I went a bit away from the rest of the group and chatted with a couple of big thick scotches, trying to keep warm in this Tasmanian mountain weather. And he decided that it was in his interest, his family's interest, and racing's interest generally, to come back and give evidence before the tribunal.
Murray then admitted to Judge Goran and the Racing Appeals Tribunal that he'd put $50,000 on fine cotton for Robbie Waterhouse. Robbie was later found guilty of perjury, and both he and his father were banished from bookmaking and initially the track for life.
It was dreadful. It was shocking news. Financially, it took away my livelihood. The reputation, what else have you, was just disastrous.
If I'd told the truth in the start, I wouldn't have been in any trouble. I regret not having done that. It's hard once you get on a roller coaster, it's hard to get off the roller coaster. And, I was untruthful about it, which was very wrong, and I regret it. I wouldn't do it ever again. But it's hard once you get on that roller coaster to get off. It perhaps required more strength of character than I had at that time.
3 men, including trainer Haitana and the somewhat inflatedly described mastermind, John Patrick Gillespie, went to jail for the ring-in. And caught in the crossfire was Gay Waterhouse, daughter of T.J. Smith and Robbie's wife.
I think whenever people are under any sort of major criticism, I don't care what profession you're in, they always eye you slightly, as though you've got some sort of leprosy or something, thinking that if you got too close, they might catch it. That's life. I mean, you have to have very broad shoulders and have to be able to wear a smile on your face and not show them your true feelings. And that's how I was when Rob was going through his traumas with the fine cotton.
Gay's association by marriage meant she had to fight a long legal battle against the Sydney racing establishment and the ancient prejudices enshrined in its rules.
An Australian rule of racing at that time prevented the spouse or partner of a disqualified person from being a licensed person. That was the rules. It wasn't the AJC's decision. They had no choice.
He can lead, can't he? Dress circle, can he lead? They were wrong, and they were proven wrong by the ruling that has since been passed. And it was really, I suppose, a landmark victory for working women in Australia, because you can't be judged on your spouse. You have to be judged on your own merits, and that's where the AJC made their big boo-boo. Sarah, just hold him for a second, please, while I just...
It ultimately took the threat of Supreme Court intervention to force the racing powers to license Gay as a trainer. The woman who at 4 had sat on the back of Tulloch would become not just a successful trainer, but the kind of high-profile presence that racing so badly needed. Because elsewhere there were people much worse than the fine cotton mob. In a fiercely competitive field, Laurie Connell was perhaps the most exuberant, loud-mouthed Aussie entrepreneur of the 80s.
He was like straight out of a Dick Francis or a Damon Runyon or a Nat Gould novel. Yeah, he's a character, Laurie. In an era when there were a lot of those people around, particularly in West Australia.
He also had a pathological need to win, whatever it took. The '83 Bunbury Cup would become an enduring example of the Connell technique.
Well, we were working horses by Bob Myers, and he asked me if I'd, he said, like, how would you like to make $3,000 for stopping Strike Softly from winning? And I asked who it was for. I had a pretty good idea who it was for at the time because there was only one other horse in that race that had any chance at all. And eventually, after some discussion, he told me it was for Laurie Connell. So I told him I'd want $5,000, not $3,000 for Laurie Connell.
Red light on. Going to be a good battle. Gates are open. They're on their way. Saratoga Express downhill. One lost the rider coming out of the stalls. One lost the rider. Strike Softly. Strike Softly's lost the rider coming out of the gates.
As the gates opened, Hobby took a dive, jumping off Strike Softly, in theory leaving the race clear for Saratoga Express, which Connell had heavily backed.
And the leader, Saratoga Express. He's been handed the race on a plate, Saratoga.
Sometimes the money's better if you get beaten than what it is if you win. If you see, in my case, for Strike Softly, I was going to get $200 to win that race and $5,000 to lose it. So the choice for me was obvious. There was no argument for me, there was no battle of conscience for me in it. The choice was there and the choice was obvious. I mean, we didn't realise, or I didn't realise, that we were actually breaking a law when we did it because we were doing it all the time and other people were doing it.
At the 100, Saratoga Express about to be joined by Rowella. Rowella goes...
However, as sometimes happens, the fix fouled up when the 6-to-1 runner, Rowella, beat the Connell horse. Hobby was outed for 2 years. Then, to keep him away from all subsequent inquiries, Connell sent him on an 8-year, all-expenses jaunt.
He was the best travel agent I'd ever dealt with. I mean, I used to ring from somewhere. I'd be sitting in London, laying in bed still, and I decided I might go to France or Switzerland. So I'd pack my case and make a phone call, and by the time I got to the airport, there'd be a ticket there waiting for me. I mean, you couldn't ask for better.
But 8 years after the race, Bobby Myers, the trainer of Hobby's horse, Strike Softly, spilled his guts to the police on the Bunbury fix. Connell was sentenced to 5 years jail for perverting the course of justice by paying Hobby to stay out of the country. And again, the fact that racing would shrug off the bad and the ugly of Connell was in some measure due to the good. People like Colin Sidney Hayes, who made up the triumvirate of million-dollar trainers with Smith and Cummings.
I know, speaking from Dad, he respected them both as trainers, but he used to hate getting beaten in the big races by them because he was a very, very competitive man.
But Dulcify well clear. Brent Thompson going for his 4th Cox plate, and he's got it.
Dulcify, perhaps the best horse Hayes ever had, won the Cox plate with contempt.
Dulcify's won by a minute, and that's the way he might win the Melbourne Cup.
For the purist, it's the race that matters most. And in Dulcify, it seemed another great champion was emerging. The victory ensured he was the favourite for the '79 Melbourne Cup, the first that schoolboy David Hayes would witness.
I remember going to the races and watching it, sitting down in between Mum and Dad, incredibly excited, and Dad was very happy. And then coming into the 600, I remember Mum asking him, "How's he going, Cole?" Because I had no idea. And he didn't say much. Then about the 400, he said he's gone, he's broken down. And then really didn't say another word. It was shattering for the whole family. Mum owned it and Dad trained it.
And a gap in the field to Carew.
Dulcify had been galloped on by the eventual winner, the Cummings-trained Hyperno. With a broken pelvis and internal injuries, the horse kept trying to run.
He died, which was just awful. And when it was such big news in Adelaide, the school, which was a Church of England non-racing school, the day I was coming back, that they said that David would have treated this like a death in the family, and it really was that for us.
In some consolation, a year later the Hayes-trained Belldale Ball won the Cup.
Belldale Ball was 200 to go, was over 3 and
The beaten favourite was Hyperno.
to go on and win the Melbourne Cup, although My Blue Denim is flashing down the outside. Belldale Ball is too good.
But like Tommy Smith, Colin Hayes would only ever win 2 Melbourne Cups. They're hard to come by. But Colin would live to see his son's first Cup win with Jern in '94.
Jern's still in front, he's 2 lengths clear, he's holding them, and Jern's going to win the Melbourne Cup by 2 lengths to Paris Lane. Umpala a half ahead away third.
I was asked a question once, how do you think you'll go as a trainer compared with your father? And Dad was sitting there, and I said, oh, much better. And he was horrified, absolutely horrified. And then I quipped in that I had a better teacher, and he could accept that.
In fact, Jern, now a resident stallion at the Hayes Lindsay Park stud, is a symbol of the fact that Colin was much more than a good-mannered, fair-dealing trainer. While Australia's obsession with breeding thoroughbreds began with a Waterhouse, Captain Henry 200 years ago, today's highly international bloodstock industry is partially a Colin Hayes legacy. The local industry is now part of a world operation, where star stallions are shuttled around the globe, servicing mares as only stallions can. Coolmore Studs Danehill costs $120,000 for this brief engagement. The price, the gamble on the outcome, and a certain brutality about the whole business are telling metaphors for what happened to the bloodstock industry in the money lust of the 80s.
People were getting involved in the most outrageous and outlandish tax minimisation plans. Thoroughbreds, of course, appeals to the ego, you know, the glamour, the whole thing, as well as the tax advantages. So people who had spent all their lives reading contracts to the very last comma were signing contracts that they hadn't read, you know, in the last 5 minutes of the financial year. Just signing these things to get involved with breeding ventures for the tax advantages of the whole thing.
Greed and the chance of glory meant that nose twitchers weren't needed to bring fools and their money to the same fate, financially, as the mares.
They were sending mares off to stallions, and they'd say, this mare is going off to see Bletchingley and the fee is $125,000. But because these people didn't understand horses and didn't understand what was going on, they wouldn't see the accounts till 2 years later, and they'd say, hang on, that mare went to another stallion that was only, you know, $5,000 fee. Where did the other $120,000 go? Gosh, don't know. Disappeared into the ether somewhere. And that was happening a lot.
110 on my right, 110,000, 20, 120, 30, 130, 40, 140, 50.
The same cockeyed, optimistic egos of men like Bond and Skase and all the other 80s overreachers swaggered into the thoroughbred auction ring.
As I said yesterday, these horses are the champions of the future. You want to win our big races in New South Wales and Victoria next year and the years after. Here they are before you.
In the 6 days of their '89 Easter sales, the auctioneers William Inglis, who'd been selling horses since 1865, hit a record turnover of $36 million.
At 200,000 only. 200,000.
We had 5 horses make $1 million or more, with the top price horse making 1.5. Bart Cummings spent $13 million at the sale. Tommy Smith spent $7.5. Brian Mayfield Smith spent $4, and they were the biggest buyers.
55, 55, 55.
But then that Keating recession struck. The promised money melted away. Bart Cummings, who'd bought horses on behalf of a tax minimisation syndicate, was left holding the bridle.
I put too much trust in human nature. My friends are the horses.
At 50,000.
It'd be hard to imagine Bart Cummings being taken down by anyone, but I think again, he stepped out of his world and he trusted that people who were talking about a form of financing knew what they were talking about. And they left their run a bit late themselves. Their timing was awful. And I think it was a combination of those things. But again, it was greed.
If it hadn't been for the generosity of the Inglis organisation, Cummings would have probably been destroyed by bankruptcy.
We were far and away his biggest creditor, and if it wasn't for, if we hadn't decided to let him train, he wouldn't be training today.
Hello, phone time.
Yet perhaps the greediest of all racing entities that grew to power through the 80s were the totalisator agency boards. The TABs began in the early 60s. Their promise was to bury the SP, not on moral grounds, but because governments, having tasted the easy pleasures of gambling revenue, became addicted. They made racing richer, but at what price? With the bulk of them now privatised, their shareholders, not racing, are the apparent priority. Any sense of sport has been buried under a wall-to-wall program of relentless and often rubbishy racing. Laurie Connell would have been proud of them. He left us with one of racing's most hauntingly horrid images. Almost 20 years after Big Faloo, a Connell horse called Rocket Racer won the Perth Cup by almost 9 lengths.
Rocket Racer's 8 in front. He's 10 in front. He's going to win from Puckle Harbour and Royal Sharif.
He'd almost certainly been pumped full of etorphine, elephant juice, though mysteriously a swab was never taken.
When they bet 50 to 1 8 weeks ago, I couldn't believe my good luck, and I took it that, and I took the 9 to 4 they put up on offer today. Not so good for the bookmakers, very good for me.
Connell collected a reported $500,000 in bets and ordered champagne all round. Rocket Racer was already dying.
The image of this horse that's just won the biggest race on the Western Australian calendar being manhandled by a series of people off the track is one of the most distressing images that goes out across all, as the lead item on all the newses across the country. Just confirms what's been going out to the public during the 80s, that we have the Fine Cotton incident, that we have the George Brown murder, that we have the Rocket Racer Perth Cup. Racing has a serious image problem at this stage.
In the Western Australian town of Wagen, a somewhat different approach to winning was being tried. Time Frame hadn't won a race for 2 years when he was passed into the healing hands of Angela Smith. She decided to train him for the Perth Cup, Rocket Racer's last race.
I do spiritual healing on animals and people, and I found I have a gift where I can pick up the problem areas on a horse's body, and I give healing to that area and pass messages on to the horse.
Into the straight and Time Frame first to Homer, leads by 2.5 Regimental Tattoo, then JBC, Boheed storming home from Unpretentious and Alco, but it's still Time Frame, 1.5 lengths, Regimental Tattoo and Boheed, Time Frame in front, 50 to go from Regimental Tattoo.
He just broke all their hearts and just kept going and just didn't stop, yeah. And we went insane. We were jumping up and down, and when he won, it was like slow motion. Just to see that horse that had been written off turn around and win the biggest race in West Australia was the most unbelievable experience ever.
And in a rare racing triumph for the bush, the horse, and humanity, the Wagen TAB had to borrow money from the pub to pay its winning punters.
Some people bought a washing machine, others did renovations to the house. They made a lot of money off him. Yeah, everybody gained, which was just great. That's the way it should be.
While falling crowds and a million other ways to lose money are today a greater threat to racing than corruption, it's still about. In New South Wales in the 90s, the AJC lost its control of racing to the Thoroughbred Racing Board. Though a dubiously political decision, it was linked to jockeys having passed tips, Trimboli-like, to a drug dealer. But for all the contemporary pressures on racing, at the 2000 Golden Slipper, there were portents of its stubborn will to survive. its old power to unify even the strangest of bedfellows.
I wasn't for Group 1 racing.
John Singleton once made TV commercials portraying Bob Hawke's Labour mates as Stalinist. Now they were co-owners of a horse called Belle de Jour.
Lane cleared in their set for the Amy Golden Slipper. They're racing and Belle de Jour came up in the air. Beasley was nearly catapulted out of the saddle. Away quickly, French Braids. King of
Their filly was left 4 lengths behind when the field jumped. But then she got up to win.
And here's the winner. Crown Glory starting to storm home with Belle de Jour. Belle de Jour's got the run with Crown Glory. Belle de Jour hit the lead. And one of the great wins in the Golden Slipper after bungling the start. She's won it from Crown Glory.
The miracle of the win had Singleton, as promised, shouting the entire public bar of Rose Hill. He refused to buy the members a beer. No doubt the gesture, not to mention his affection for the ex-Prime Minister who believed we all once loved him, is now part of racing folklore. Wherever he is, Her Scalia would have smiled.
$32,500 worth of trophies. The Foster's Melbourne Cup is about to be run in 1999 as the excitement builds at Flemington on the first Tuesday in November.
The Melbourne Cup is an institution. There is simply nothing comparable with it anywhere in the world, where a whole nation stops.
For the last time in the 1900s, the Melbourne Cup is about to be run in front of a massive crowd here at Flemington and many far-flung parts of the world. Weeks and months and years of preparation are about to pay off with the realisation of a dream.
Just like the Queen's walking past, but they wouldn't stop probably for her, but they stopped for the national race.
The favourite Sky Heights, Rogan Josh and Tie the Knot in the second one.
Sky Heights jumped away well down on the inside. Yavana's Pace jumped away fairly. Further out on the track, Rogan Josh began nicely and so too did Brew. Second coming Zaza Bell. The message going forward in the early part of the race, and they were followed by Central Park. He's right off the track. Tie the Knot's about middle of the field, and Zempan is going up towards the leaders with Lahar as they race onto the course proper. 2,800 metres to go. And the one. Come on, Tie the Knot! Come on!
They come in the darkness before dawn. Horses, riders, trainers. Track work. Bush battlers and Bart Cummings. This is their common stamping ground. A relentless grind of hard yards. The eternal hope of racing begins anew each morning here. For what we will know as the last Melbourne Cup of the 20th century, Sydney trainer Guy Walter has a horse perhaps to die for. He has 90 days and Tie the Knot.
I just walk him around here now. I just give him 20 minutes, half an hour walk. And I take him to the track every morning, and I have done for most of his career. You know, I think that having that personal contact with him every day is very important, very important. You better do... You can do spinning heel, mate? To use a cliche, it's a dream come true. I mean, every trainer's dreams of getting a horse like him. I know I did for a long time. Probably never see another one half as good as him. I mean, he's just a great horse. He's a great athlete. I won't say trains himself, but all we've really got to do is guide him. He loves to race, he loves to compete, and you just got to keep him fit and healthy, and he does the rest.
In fact, a quarter of a century ago, a young Guy Walter had his first Melbourne Cup moment. He found himself strapping a horse called Think Big, only the third horse in history to win the Cup 2 years running.
Think Big has got up to win the Cup. Think Big has won. Leilani is second, third of the race then.
Really, I was a little bit young to appreciate it. I think the first Melbourne Cup I'd ever seen, I let in the winner.
With trainer Bart Cummings, the second to prepare 4 winners and the first to win the Quinella 3 times.
Everyone's got dreams, and I had a dream of being a successful trainer, and I initially went and worked for Bart Cummings because I admired him so much as a trainer. He was very, very good to me. I was dealing with these top-class horses, and I thought, well, this is pretty good. You know, they just go home and eat after a race, and I got a rude shock when I started training, and I went down about 10 divisions in the quality of horses.
With the hands-on support of his wife, Wendy, it's been a long and sometimes hard climb up through those divisions. Even now, with 30 horses in training, he knows how tough success can be, and how fleeting.
A couple of years after I started, I remember I had a really bad trot for about 6 months, and what would I do as an alternative? And that was a bit of a worry. I wasn't going to be a rocket scientist. He loves the camera, John. So does his trainer. Righto. Funny, I had a filly, I forget her name, won a race at Moruya, won a maiden at Moruya. I thought it was like the Melbourne Cup. Because I had about 8 in work, and I hadn't had a winner for about 6 months.
Darazari, Tie the Knot have raced up on the outside. They've hit the lead.
And in Tie the Knot, Walter finally had a horse that began to make him more than just a respected trainer who got the best from some very ordinary animals.
Tie the Knot in front, responds, he's too good, he's back with a big win. Here's Tie the Knot, he hasn't flinched.
The red and white colours were getting up in big races. Victory in the 99 Weight for Age Mercedes Classic was followed 3 weeks later by the Sydney Cup. Tie the Knot became only the third horse since Carbine to win it back-to-back.
He has a good look at the crowd 50 metres out, he's a real champion all right.
Number one thing that makes a good trainer is good horses. It's like a good football coach. If he's got a bad team, he's got no hope. And I think you can't get away from the fact that luck's a tremendous part of this game. And you've got to have the right type of horses. And to think otherwise, really, you're not paying tribute enough to the good horses. They can do anything in comparison with the bad ones.
One thing about it, he never gives in. You never give in, do you, mate?
Tie the Knot's last run in Sydney before the Cup campaign heads for Melbourne will be the Craven Plate. As certain horses always have, Tie the Knot transcends the ancient interstate enmities. In Melbourne, June Bell is one of those southern punters who has a passion for the northern horse that wins from back in the field.
He seems to me to be such an easy horse. He doesn't sort of sweat up in the saddling yard. He doesn't seem to get spooked. Any horse that can win 4 point however many million he's won has got to be pretty good, haven't they?
With Guy and Wendy Walter is their strapper who, like his boss, might just lead a cup winner past the Flemington Roses. Brett Adams has shared the vagaries of training winners, and he knows the horse almost as well as the man he works for.
Well, everything has to be spot on, you know. And he's just always thinking about the horse, you know. You'll ask him a question and he doesn't even hear because he's just thinking about tie the knot, or if he's doing the right thing or wrong thing, and he just goes over and over and over in his head. The work to do next and which races to put him in and things like that. All that's on his mind is this horse and is he doing the best possible job on him.
Number one, he's tied the knot, $1.30. Did he make up for the Warwick Stakes? Great run first up.
In the Craven Plate, Tie the Knot will start odds-on favourite. His jockey is New Zealand-born Shane Billy Idle Dye, fresh from winning his appeal against a controversial suspension for not riding the horse on its merits in the Warwick Stakes. Dye is perhaps the most admired and disliked jockey of modern racing. He's been the owner's choice of riders since Darren Beedman's spiritually inspired but short-lived retirement.
6 to run in the Craven Stakes. They stand well. Gates release. Tie the Knot out wide on the track, jumped away fairly well. Inshallah on the inside and also going out quickly past her Express. 900 metres to go on the Craven Stakes. Nahayan in front with her ears pricked.
It's not the most glittering field ever assembled, but for his supporters there are some anxious moments. Then comes that characteristic surging drive to run them down.
Tie the Knot now lurking 3 wide, coming with this run from Able Master as they wheel the bend at the 500. It's Nahayan in front with Inshallah the first challenger. Pastor Express 2 lengths away from Arena. Tie the Knot and Able Master. Nahayan still in front as they come over the hill, but here's Tie the Knot and Arena inside of him, and they're coming with their runs together. Tie the Knot at the 250. It reached the front with Arena trying to match him. Tie the Knot in front. Dye hands and heels. I think he's got Arena covered, then Pastor Express and Able Master, but Tie the Knot getting the neck out, stretching the neck away near home, and he's going to kill them. Tie the Knot over 2 lengths to Arena. Pastor Express third for Able Master.
I just love him. I just love him. I get very emotional about him, and I just love him. I think he's got a marvellous chance for the Melbourne Cup, and he's just a wonderful horse.
The Craven Plate win, 1 month out from the Melbourne Cup, gives Tie the Knot the mixed blessing of being pre-race favourite.
It's a good fitness run. He hasn't beaten any great horses today, I didn't think, but it's all a step closer. Each win's a step closer.
While the hearts and money of the nation turn now towards Melbourne, across the subcontinent, a racing galaxy away, Kalgoorlie has a cup of its own.
Just bring him up the fence here, bud.
Here, Rod Freddo Brown is trying to win the last Kalgoorlie Cup of the century. One of his runners, like Tie the Knot, is sired by Nassapur.
Come up, old fella. He's been around more times than I have, so he knows what's going on. Come up, mate. That's what I said, I'm getting a bit old.
Well, my father's a jockey and trained horses, so I love horses. I really do. I reckon horses...
Right.
Well, you know, I mean, when you've been brought up with them, you learn to sort of love the way they sort of, the character of them. You know what I mean? Horses have got character. They sort of tell you more stories than what most people can. Our whole family's been in a stage where 5 boys, 1 girl, and they all sort of had to do something to the horses. And now, as a result, 3 brothers train, 2 gamblers, 1 sister likes to have a bet too, so, you know what I mean? It's through the family, you know what I mean? Everyone always asks me, how you going? I said, battling. Battling train, I always say battling, in a sense that, well, I've never had a good horse given to me, and the horse that I got, I've turned him into something. I mean, they've won their races, and I think you have to work 5 times harder than a trainer that's had a good horse from Melbourne, bought from Melbourne. Someone buys a flash horse and gives it to you, well, you know, and it's had the ability to win in Melbourne. I've never had that chance. Short workout, tune him up. He's like a motor car, getting ready to go. I hope. Take him out, mate. There you go, mate. Yeah, that was good. That was a good workout. That's all he wants. We've only got 2 in work, which makes it hard, you know what I mean, to have to have even a runner in the Cup is a big thing, you know what I mean? Because it's one of those things not many people can get around to doing it, you know?
What do you reckon, 10, John, eh? 10:30? Aubrey, yeah.
It's 3 in the morning, and the Cup favourite heads down the Hume Highway. The climax of Tie the Knot's campaign must be on Melbourne turf, not his happiest hunting ground. In the '98 Cup, despite an impressive, sustained finish, Tie the Knot came 6th. But perhaps there were excuses. There usually are. Since the first Cup, Archers in 1861, only 33 favourites have won it. Part of the Cup glory, and in the nature of all handicaps, is that while it's been won by great horses, Carbine and Phar Lap, and more recently the Saintleys, the Might and Powers, a lot of dogs have also had their November day. Phar Lap lost more Melbourne Cups than he won. Neither Tulloch nor Kingston Town could manage it. Tommy Smith, the greatest trainer in history, won it only twice.
Really, it is the race on the Australian calendar. To win it would be the pinnacle of any trainer's career. So it means a hell of a lot, really.
In the final delicate balancing act of setting a horse for the Cup, Walter will base Tie the Knot an hour's float from Flemington at Ballarat.
The main factor in coming here was the galloping facilities. Superb racecourse, 2,400 metres around, great surface, and they make it available to him every time he's going to do any work, which is, you wouldn't get that anywhere else, I don't think. We'll go out on the grass, canter slow from the 2,000, so you go half pace in the 1,800, 3/4 7, 3/4 1,400, and sprint up 1.
Strong last furlong?
Yeah, nice job, but on the bit, yeah. He's still got to work race it, but nice strong last furlong, but on the bit. I think he looks good, don't you? This is his 3rd visit here. Very peaceful surroundings, very relaxed. Nice climate at this time of year, cool. He loves it here. Always does well here, always eats well. The theory this year was to try and give him a base of races in Sydney to fit him up for the 3,200 of the Melbourne Cup, and at the same time have him down here not too long before the Cox Plate, so he's still pretty sharp enough for 2,000. Sounds good, the theory. I'll tell you on Saturday, I'll tell you after the Cox Plate whether it works, but that was the theory. Yeah. But that was perfect work.
From a city built on gold, the horse will ultimately attempt to take the Cup winner's purse of $1.8 million. For at least one of the other contending owners, the stake money is probably neither here nor there. Sheikh Mohammed, the owner of the Godolphin training and breeding establishment, has entered the champion European stayer, Cape Tara. With it comes the much less fancied stablemate, Central Park. They will be in the hands of a man originally from Newcastle in New South Wales.
On his home turf, this horse is the best in Europe. In Europe, this horse has proven he's the best. But obviously, it's a different ball game when you travel from the other side of the world. It's been a long season. Although his last win was very impressive, he comes here with a very good chance.
As the foreign horses head for quarantine at Sandown, Australians, despite the years of plunder by New Zealand runners, remain divided by the globalisation of the Melbourne Cup. Hundreds of thousands of dollars have been spent just to get 5 foreign invaders to Australia. Not all of them will even make it to the start on Cup Day.
Well, the Cup means a lot to me, obviously, because I'm Australian. You know, you're brought up on the Melbourne Cup. Everyone from, you know, a 5-year-old up knows about the Melbourne Cup. So, you know, it'd mean a lot to me. We could win the next 10 Epsom derbies in England, but if we won the Cup this year, that'd eclipse all of that.
Kalgoorlie has perhaps as great a claim as anywhere to the spirit that defined Australian racing for most of its 200 years in the sun.
We sold a horse. My wife sold a horse, half shares, for about $500-600. I grabbed the 500 or 600, run across the top, done the horse money straight away on the first spin I had. It was the best 500 ever done, I thought. The quickest, put it that way. Oh, how you going, son? Beauty, wasn't it, eh? I see people at school now, and you hear stories and that they get kicked out because they can't read and write, and they end up no hope or whatever. But that's silly. They should just try the racing game, because you'll learn to toughen you up and you'll learn to be more of a street sense, you know what I mean? This is the famous game that we played when we were kids. I teach my kids how to play it now, and they love it. It's the famous Kalgoorlie Cup. Come on, line them up.
I got.
Come on, let them go. Go.
The come-in spinner attitude, rolling marbles, 2 flies up the wall, are not unique to Kalgoorlie.
I hope that's the Barbara and Battleground tomorrow, with a bit of luck.
But its Cup Day means as much to Fredo Brown and his family as the decisive few minutes in Melbourne on that first Tuesday of November.
Right out, away you go.
Paintings, he's in front. Go Paintings! Go Paintings! Yes! I won again. I won again.
All right, settle down. I've tried full-time training about 4 or 5 times and gone broke. So, and since my wife grabbed hold of me and told me that we've got to stop and start going to work like normal people do and still have our horses. So now it's sort of like a hobby to me, and 2 horses in the Cup, and I've got a job paid up for, you know what I mean? Everything's sweet, you know what I mean? Many occasions we lived in a caravan when we first met each other, me and my wife, and we went home from the races and nothing to eat, couldn't pay the caravan park man any rent money, and gone and had baked beans. That's our tea for the night, you know what I mean? It's called eating the paper off the walls, but then you see the nights when you win, you're all off getting champagne and you got Chinese or whatever you want to eat, you know what I mean? You're living it big.
It would be just unbelievable for him to win a Kalgoorlie Cup. It'd be just, you'll see the tears just rolling, you will. It'd be just unbelievable. Yeah, something huge, yeah. And something to talk about for the rest of his life.
Ty the Knot goes to Sydney, wins the Sydney Cup. We're in Kalgoorlie open for this Cup, so makes it a bit hard. I'd like to swap horses, but still, we'll try our best, don't we? Come on, mate.
Big welcome to today's great race car, BMW Cox Plate, coming up at 4:10.
First run in 1922, the Cox Plate, named in honour of the founder of Moonee Valley, is a weight-for-age event, and for the purist, the premier race in the Australian calendar. TJ Smith had 7 Cox Plate winners. Kingston Town won it for him 3 years running. Phar Lap took the Cox Plate Melbourne Cup double in 1930. So did Saintly in 96, with only Rising Fast in between.
Where's Ben? Ben? Ben, quick mate, we want to get him off. Grab the bridle. Grab your bridle, please. Where's your bridle? Brett's been. You got my bridle, Brett? No. Brett, give me his bridle, mate. Which one is that? Yeah, mate. You alright?
There's a lot of pressure, but then again, you know, that's what we're all in the business for, to have a horse like this and to compete at this level. So if you can't handle it, you're in the wrong business, I suppose. But, you know, when you've spent your whole life working towards being a successful horse trainer, and you've got a horse in with a very strong winning chance in the sort of one of the top races of the year, naturally there's quite a lot swinging on it. There's your reputation as a trainer, there's There's, the financial rewards, etc., etc. So it is. There's a lot of pressure, I think. A lot of pressure.
You're on the news, boy. Hi, Wendy. How are you?
How are you?
Good. Good to see you. Yeah.
Good.
I'm not as nervous as Guy.
No, now it's fine. Just tell me what you want to do. What's Shane doing? So where do you want me to see you?
Candidates on the track now for the opening race today. Here at Valley, welcome to the 1999 BMW Cox Plate, ladies and gentlemen. The runners are coming out onto the track for the opening race. The track rating is dead. The rails are the 2 metres.
He looks $1 million, doesn't he? But we did the right thing, with that sheet on the float. Not an ounce of sweat on him.
10 on 1. 30 on 1. 201.
Old fellow. He's been very good.
It may be 1999, but jockeys still get the kind of pre-race pep talk that children were given before a royal tour in the Menzies era.
Cox Plate this year is one of the international races in the Emirates World Championship Series, and it's being televised worldwide. When you shift in to take up a position, you must ensure that you're 2 lengths clear of the runners behind you, because any rider that causes interference or wrecks this race can expect a long term of suspension, and we'd also consider, as we said last week, imposing fines up to the maximum. Any questions? No, thank you.
Thank you.
You would like to see him run very well today. You'd like to see him running on, winning, or else running in the first 4 or 5 anyway and doing something. But this is the race he's been set for. This is his first major test. It's a big Group 1 race. It's the biggest weight for age race in Australia. He's out there to win, and we desperately need to win today.
He won one on octagonal as a 3-year-old. This is Shane Billy Idol 9.
For Melbourne punters in particular, Sydney-based Di is the unforgiven. Like every jockey born, he's cost them money, but here they hold it against him. Rightly or wrongly, he has a reputation for never admitting he got it wrong. He's not had a good season. He needs this one.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 1999 BMW Cox Plate riders, we wish them all the best, a safe ride, and may the best horse and jockey win. Thank you, gentlemen. Good luck.
Oh, this is the moment.
D-Day. Unbelievable racing.
Yes, certainly that. Great atmosphere, isn't it? Fantastic.
Especially when they walk out under there,
The versatile Sydney Cup winner, Tie the Knot, ridden by Shane Dye.
Tie the Knot is up against the best horses in the country. Sky Heights, Intergaze, Redute's Choice, and the champion mare, Sunline.
He's bolting.
Sunline at the 1500, allowed to bowl along at her own leisure, leading by a length, Redute's Choice.
Shane Dye has predicted Sunline won't take the pressure of a Cox Plate. But she's allowed to dictate the race. And finally, Dye must put Tie the Knot's courage and his own whip where his pre-race mouth was. Tie the Knot has had to settle for the runners-up money, a mere $336,000. But today, at least, neither money nor winning are everything.
It was a great trial for the Melbourne Cup. Naturally, it's disappointing when they can't win. But running second's the next best thing, you know. I thought he ran a great race.
It may be a top weights cup this year with Cave Tara, Tie the Knot, Sky Heights. Well, they're the three favourites. So, I mean, the bookmakers are the best judges, and they consider they're the three best chances. And I see now that he's equal favourite with Cave Tara.
The Cox Plate, the whole Melbourne Spring Carnival, tend to disguise the true state of Australian racing at the dawn of the 21st century. Not so far from the madding crowds of the big race days, there are signs that the track is in terminal decay. Even on some city courses, there are days when the proverbial gun fired into the stands would do little harm. And there are bush tracks where the price of the bullets would be a problem.
I describe them as resembling badly run wakes. The race meetings today, some of them, compared with the race meetings of years gone by. It was put to me by one senior TAB executive, it wouldn't matter if nobody went to the races. I find that a deplorable attitude.
Thanks to the TAB's phone betting and television, racing has never been richer. Many of its courses seldom lonelier.
They're all set to jump here.
It may be too soon for the obituary, but so much of racing as we knew it, as a socially unifying national theatre, is dying.
And Cindy's Gifts was very slow to go. Tasty dish.
Welcome back to Sky Racing with the last at Cobram coming up.
Then it was a sport. Now it's more of an industry. Once upon a time it was the horse, backing the jockey, having the feel for the horse and the jockey, following the horse and the jockey. Now it's like a poker machine. They pull a handle, they put a ticket in, they get it out, they play numbers.
For some clubs, the answer to a changing world has been to race under lights. Nightclub racing, a champagne circus backed by slightly hysterical advertising in which horses are almost incidental. It might work, at least relatively, but it has a certain decline of an empire desperation. And perhaps before they put another disco under the stands, someone should remind them what became of disco.
Couldn't go with them, and the horse starting his run down the outside with Maximizer. Now the Jay's got the run through. Gypsy Commander.
Events like the Kalgoorlie Cup look increasingly like tradition's last stand. It's still the community's big social event, but elsewhere, even heart and soul seem endangered racing species. For many clubs, survival will need a miracle. But what odds that, with the nuns of Kalgoorlie asking for tips as well as giving them?
Wandering. Something wandering, anyway.
Battle Groom and the Barber. Right, spot on.
And Freddo Brown, with two unfancied horses in the cup, Battle Groom and the Barber, could do with some divine help himself.
Got to keep battling. The battle's getting harder. Hello, love. You know, I mean, you talk about thrills and getting lifts in life. People take drugs to get lifts. You wouldn't get the biggest buzz out of this you've ever seen in your life. I mean, you can have all the drugs in the world, but you see a horse hit the front and kick away, the adrenaline rush is better than anything else. Mrs. bought me a green shirt one day and I told her to take it back. I've still got my red undies on. 2 years ago when I ran third in the Kalgoorlie Cup, not the same. They've been washed once or something. But yeah, I got them on, red girth. Very superstitious, mate, very, very superstitious. You know, he's scared of other horses, mate. As soon as horses get anywhere near him, I've had him on the track and have horses coming towards me and he'll just run the opposite way and you think, well, hold it, mate, it's another horse. You know, that's what he's like. If he thinks he's got one over you, he'll run. If you collar him up and say, I've got you beat, all right, I've had enough. You've lost me, you know what I mean? Best luck, mate, you'll be right, mate. We've been walking out there for a friggin' hour and a half.
Yeah, doing good.
Yeah. Oh, I'm never nervous one. You're right, he's had the hooks on this morning, so
yep.
Turn him in when you want him, mate. Hands and heels, you know what to do. Well done. He's fired up, mate. He's right. He's fired up to the minute.
Light on now.
Red light on. Racing to the cup.
Sinatra jumped well with Battle Groom. They'll head off Lord Lomos. Pete the Painter's rushing forward. The Barbers looking to get across, and Gladwin was able to settle Moonrise behind them with Irish Rort.
Sit up behind him. Just sit up behind him now. Sit up on him. Sit up on him.
The Barbers up running second ahead of Pete the Painter, who settled well on the fence. 2 lengths.
I told this idiot, the other kid, he's got to get Battle Groom rolling. So you can't sit that far back.
About 3 lengths away, then on the inside is the Barber from Scepter Smile. Moonrise was able to track them up into the
Dig him up. No, he's not digging him up.
Moonrise strolling home. Mystery to me's got a miraculous inside run, but
come on! Battle Groom's in it! Come on, son! Come on, mate!
He grabbed Corporate Street. Moonrise battling back. It's Pocket Tur getting away.
Come on, you son! Look at this Pox horse running home. He's a shit horse.
Henry flashed home to run third. Mystery to me, Moonrise, Battle Groom next.
Danny Miller.
Unbelievable, I can't believe it. He's doing the best work on the line than any horse in the race, and the idiot's trying to wind him up. I told him, get him wind up, get into him. Over the back, I was screaming over the back, you give him too much start. You can't give him that much start and pick him up. He's not a sitting sprint horse, he's a plotter.
I couldn't go early. Yeah. Couldn't go early. He went well.
Yeah. Oh, it's a big run, mate. Like, we know he's no champion, but the horse can grind at one pace. You can't come from 10 lengths last and sprint over the top of him. He's not Bernborough.
No.
He's not Tie the Knot. Every year I learn something different, and one day, might be next year, the year after, my son might win the cup. I don't care, but it'll come around. It'll be here, because we're local people. We've been here all our life. We're here to crack them, you know what I mean? We'll beat them one day. Don't worry about me. I might look bored and ugly, but I'll go all right. Look at this, Mog. Hey? Come on, who wants one? Who wants a beer? Yeah. Who's by? Don't worry about giving me a freaking car. We got to get. Who wants a beer? Who wants a beer? Who's by? Who wants? Don't worry about today's.
Yeah, the girls want one. Chris wants one. Joe.
Come on, mate. Get over here with the battlers. Yeah.
Don't be intimidated now, Fred. You keep drinking.
At Flemington on Derby Day, Tie the Knot will race for the last time before the Cup. The gelding will run in the McKinnon Stakes, named for the man who once had all geldings barred from our classic races.
It is one of the most important, the McKinnon Stakes. Right down through the years, it's been a pointer to who's going to win the Melbourne Cup. Good luck, darling.
What about the fact that he's 1 win from 10 starts in Melbourne and he's a flip?
Oh, it looks gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous.
Well, Tie the Knot certainly looks good. The last one's going in. I'd like to see him go straight. He gets his chance on the big track here.
Referral joins the line. They're set to go. Louis Vuitton, McKinnon Stakes. 2,000 metres and they're off and racing. Referral missed the start by a length. Rogan Josh a little slow with it.
There he is. Come on, Shane, get a good spot.
Tie the Knot, along with Northern Drake, Intergaze and the New Zealander Sent Home, will carry the big money. Guy Walters' former master, Bart Cummings, has 2 runners in the race, Rebor and Rogan Josh. Neither are highly rated.
Nicely now, there's been a genuine speed.
It's genuine.
Oliver Twist and Intergaze going up 4 deep. Sent Home poised to pounces right behind them. Then came Arena on the rails. Next Referral. Then came Rogan Josh from Rebor. Tie the Knot to the outside with Rebel as they came into the straight.
Come on, Tie the Knot. Come on, baby.
Oliver Twist joined Londolosi. 3 out was Intergaze. Then Rogan Josh. Next is Rebel making ground. Referral Sent Home and then Tie the Knot. 300 to go. It's Oliver Twist and Intergaze. 2 lengths away Rebel. Then came Rogan Josh. Tie the Knot struggling. Halfway up the straight Oliver Twist led. Coming at him Rebel and Rogan Josh in the centre. Rogan Josh goes up with Rebel to hit the lead.
He's not going to do it.
This is a strong run. Rogan Josh coming away. Rogan Josh wins it nearly a length. Second Rebel, then Oliver Twist, Aerosmith referral into Gay's Arena. Well, Tie the Knots runners really open up a can of worms. That was a poor performance.
And a great win to Rogan Josh. And look, after he's running the Caulfield Cup, he's got to be very hard to beat in the Melbourne Cup.
Guy Walter and every other trainer has been beaten by Cummings, the Cup's king. Somehow he's turned an ordinary horse from the West into a winner.
He should have run on a lot better at the finish, and I was very concerned. Shane said he wanted to hang during the race. So we'll just monitor him over the next 24 hours and see how he is.
Well, he's such a wonderful horse. We hope he's here and back to his best on Tuesday.
Yes, well, he's rarely run a bad race in his life. So, you know, it's very disturbing, really.
Oh, it would be disturbing for you, Guy.
I mean, we expect him to really run well today, and he ran his most disappointing race ever. He ran a similar race as he did in the McKinnon Stakes last year, where he pulled and hung out, but he finished the race off a bit better last year. And it's unexplained, but hopefully he's pulled up all right, and we're planning to press on for the Cup.
Tie the Knot has been given 2 thorough vet examinations. His blood test shows nothing out of the ordinary.
We had his legs checked, his fetlock joints, his knees, his feet. Other things that can happen with a performance like that, they could bleed and things like that. Well, nothing like that happened. So the major things were all okay. Then you look for any signs of muscle soreness and things like that. Nothing really dramatic there, so you know, it was all in all a bit of a worrying day.
At least Tie the Knot will start in the Cup. Injury at Sandown, the dash from Dubai of Sheikh Mohammed's vet, has been a powerful reminder of the risks involved in racing these expensive, inbred animals. Even when money is no object, it's no guarantee either.
The decision has been made for Kaif Tara not to take his place in next Tuesday's race. The horse, as you know, has suffered an injury to his left front suspensory tendon, and at this stage and any time in the future we are not prepared to put any pressure on the horse.
Let us ask our Heavenly Father through Christ his Son that he bestow his blessing on every member of the racing fraternity.
While the Sheikh's ancestors may have beaten the Catholic Crusaders, with the faith of our fathers, Bart Cummings is at the traditional pre-Cup Mass.
We learn how to be good losers, because if you start to moan about your losses, you'll very soon lose not only your money, but also your friends. And we also, I believe, are real people of hope. Once one race is over, we go on to the next one as full of hope as we were before the last race. And I think when we come to a celebration such as
Despite
this,
bankruptcy and a son Anthony banned for horse doping, Bart is the great survivor.
Because no matter who we are, there will be turbulence in our life.
At Ballarat, Tie the Knot still retains the loyal affection of his security guard, but he's slipped in the betting. The connections are now faced with one of the biggest decisions of the horse's career, whether to keep his mind on the job by racing him in blinkers for the first time ever.
Of course, he's had this fantastic career, and recently he's shown signs that perhaps he needs them, where he's wanted to run out and run in and not go straight in his races and not really concentrate on what he's doing. His enthusiasm for training is probably not as great as what it was 18 months ago. So when he failed last Saturday, raced a bit below expectations, we thought, well, possibly now's the time to put them on him because he's 5 years old. We weren't anticipating doing it this preparation, but we thought that perhaps that might be a simple way of turning him around in the short term. And generally speaking, you get the best result first run in the blinkers.
Horses do tend to lose focus, just like human beings at times.
I've worked him in blinkers
As you know, 2 or 3 times before.
Saw him at breakfast with the stars before the Cox played and blinkers.
Didn't he work well?
Yeah, he went like an arrow.
And,
Might just do the trick.
sorry, it was a good day to put him on, Brian.
That's exactly what I was thinking. You know, if they just happened to spark him up to some degree, he could leave the gates cleanly, brilliantly, and take up the perfect position in midfield. Sure, we all know he's going to need a little bit of luck from 15 to get there, but it's not beyond the realms of possibilities.
There's nothing wrong with him. He'll be all right. I think he'll be right.
With Cave Tara out of the Melbourne Cup, only the friendless Central Park is left to carry the Sheikh's colours. The man himself backs out of his planned trip to Melbourne.
Since old Cave Tara's gone by the wayside, we've had to put all our energy into this horse. Obviously, we've got a few more days to the Cup, but if he's not fit now, we'll never get him fit. Although you want your horse fit for the race, you also want him to feel well and fit and fresh in himself. Doesn't matter how fit they are, if they're flat, they're no good to you.
This perfect day will bring 104,028 people to Flemington, the nation to a stop. The biggest crowd in 50 years will recall the golden eras and stand as a cruel contrast to the reality of modern racing in other places. Tracks where they were racing before the first Melbourne Cup may soon be gone forever. And at Flemington this day, some reputations will take a battering.
He knows as soon as I walk out there to get him dressed up, and then he knows that he's going to the races. And when they see the truck, they know for sure. And they get a bit nervous, you know, and they're a bit pushier and stronger. But even humans, they get nervous before races and things like that, don't they?
Come on then, we're right. Off we go for a killing. Absolutely gorgeous.
Do you think the rose needs to be...
No, nobody's going to look at the rose. Turn round the back. You look gorgeous, darling. You look absolutely lovely.
We are talking about the highest stakes earning racehorse in Australia at present, $4.1 million, and we are condemning him on one terrible flop. Blinkers for the first time, could that... I don't think it could make such a big difference. Rogan Joss bowled them over in the McKinnon. JB Cummings applying the polish. If it wasn't Rogan Joss, so she'd be rushing at the 6-4, wouldn't you?
He's got the right credentials. He's winning the Perrier was good.
You better look and see what one we've got to get on, Jessie. They got anything up? Can you read it?
Yeah, Flemington races.
Oh, right. See, I see it up there.
And the mystery of the Cup, with its extremes of bad behaviour and good breeding, hoons, morning suits, Kmart and Prada, chundering and the merely chundrous, and jewelers.
Come on, matey.
Here we are. Now we've got to get round the saddling paddock.
Come up. Come up round here. Be good.
Oh, he's absolutely gorgeous. He'll win, Jessie.
Congratulations to all those chosen in the Classic Hats category, and thank you to all our ladies for entering. The 25 chosen are invited to return to the enclosure after race 4 for the judging of the Classic Hats heat.
How is he?
There's still nervousness about the decision on those blinkers, a need for reassurance.
You think about putting the blinkers on? I think it can't hurt. That may really help him.
And you seem a bit more relaxed yourself compared with how you've been in the past fortnight.
Yes, I just don't know about that.
Thanks,
Maybe
Bob.
I am.
You think they're okay, mate? They won't shift, will they? I'll just knock them there twice, eh? Would that be all right? I'll just knock them there like that.
As the nation is about to come to a standstill, let's have a look at these 24 brave horses that'll compete in the Foster's Melbourne Cup. Number 1 is Tie the Knot, to be ridden by Shane Dye. Guy Walter is the trainer. Only 8 7-year-olds have won the Cup the last vintage crop in '93, and Rogan Josh is 7 years of age, but he is trained by the master Bart Cummings, ridden by John Marshall. JB Cummings looking for Cup victory number 11.
Some of them are very hot. Rogan Josh is very hot. Sweat's dripping off him. Dripping. He's getting a little bit towy, but that was the same as last year. The biggest problem we got is he pulls with these blinkers.
Yeah.
But I don't think he will, do you? Do you?
Well, he doesn't track with Guy. That's all I can say. He doesn't track with.
Yeah.
If Guy Walter is feeling the presence of his old boss Bart, he can't afford to let it show. There are 3 Cummings-trained Cup runners: Rebor, bottom weight Zazabel, and Rogan Josh.
I think they'll help him. Eh?
Yeah, so do I.
Sky Heights will definitely run the Cup favourite, but you can get each way odds. The best back runner in the last 15 minutes, number 17, Rogan Josh. Not much between it and Sky Heights. The favourite Sky Heights, Rogan Josh, and Tie the Knot on the second line of betting.
$32,500 worth of trophy. The Foster's Melbourne Cup is about to be run in 1999 as the excitement builds at Flemington on the first Tuesday in November.
Further out on the track, Rogan Josh began nicely, and so too did Brew. Second coming, Zazabel. The message going forward in the early part of the race.
It is one of the roughest Melbourne Cups ever run. Favourite Sky Heights is galloped on, his hind legs stripped.
Out 4 wide, then Streak Rebor. Skybo next and Mar and Poor as they chop and change with a slackening of the speed beyond midfield. Tie the Knots up racing about 7th or 8th on the outside of second coming. Then came the hind on the rails.
Look at Tie the Knots!
Dye desperately tries to get Tie the Knot onto the rails to save ground, but there is no way in.
Central Park is the leader. The Message is second. The Warrior third. Rogan Josh was fourth. Then Zazabel. Zapwan the inside, the hind in the centre. Another length away second coming from Travel Mate. Tie the Knots about 5 lengths off the lead. Next is Laha. Sky Heights on the rails. Around them wide was Rebel.
For a long time, it seems that Australian racing may have to endure the embarrassment of the Sheikh's 50-1 chance, Central Park beating its best. Dye and Tie the Knot are trapped wide. But this year, there won't even be a face-saving late surge.
Rogan Josh, Travel Mate getting around the high, trying to come through. Rogan Josh going up the Central Park. Down on the inside, the Warrior, Zazabel, then Lahar and second coming. Central
Come on, Tie the Knot, come on!
And Rogan Josh, the outside part's got his 11th Cup. Rogan Josh has won the Cup. John Marshall and Bart Cummings have beaten Central Park. Good go for third with Zazabel.
Rogan Josh, owned by a Darwin schoolteacher, has ensured the egalitarian myths of the Cup will live on into the 21st century. James Bartholomew Cummings has won his 11th Melbourne Cup.
I can't believe Bart Cummings has done it again.
Perhaps the best that can be said for Tie the Knot, who finished 14th, is that he beat the starting favourite, Sky Heights.
Honestly, it'd be different if he jumped out and just wanted to run off and pull with the blinkers, but he jumped lovely, and I reckon he would have settled if I could have got one off the fence somewhere.
Yeah.
When I couldn't, that was it. The race was just over. There's nothing I could do about it.
But, well, that's the way it goes. He's been a great horse, can't win. Anyway, that was the Melbourne Cup.
Here's the winner, Rogan Josh. Bart Cummings has Cup victory number 11. There's no other way of describing it. The man is a genius.
In a time of wall-to-wall racing, whipped on with a Derby Munro ferocity by the TABs and their shareholders, the Melbourne Cup is racing's great survivor and its shining light. Anzac Day and Cup Day are the only unique Australian anniversaries. If the one is a remembrance of death and disaster, the other is a celebration of life and continuity. Together they seem not a bad definition of who we were and who we are. It is, of course, as dangerous to predict the future of racing or any other bloody thing as to pick the winner of the Melbourne Cup. But on the morning after, whether they met with triumph or disaster, there are horses, men and women out in the dawn. Some of them, no doubt, already beginning to dream of the next Melbourne Cup.